Welcome to jkgames, the gaming podcast where we bring you the gaming news we care about.
And maybe some that we don't.
And whether you play on easy mode,
or you like a good challenge.
This is the show where we'll try to level up your gaming knowledge. Josh,
really on this episode?
Josh, do the Final Fantasy jingle.
Ba, 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 ba.
Perfect.
Yeah. I don't even know it.
If you are new here, you're probably wondering, whoa, what did I step into? And if you've been here before, you're probably also wondering, who are those people? They don't look like Jerica or Kayla, or if you've been a fan of the show for a long time, that doesn't look like Josh. No, we're...
Who am I? Actually, identity is a big theme of Final Fantasy, so...
Okay,
Wow.
well, maybe you recognize us from your favorite Final Fantasy game. Anywho, but I'm one of your hosts, Jerica. Welcome. This is a special episode. Today we are going to be educated by our special guest, Josh.
Our resident
Hello,
expert.
everyone.
He's an expert at a lot of things, including Nintendo, Elden Ring, and now Final
Good stuff.
Fantasy.
Yes. It's always been Final Fantasy.
And I am your other host, Kayla. We'll get into this later, but part of the reason that spurred this episode was I know nothing about Final Fantasy. Absolutely zero things. So
I know
I'm excited to be
about
educated.
45%.
Okay. That's actually pretty good.
Like if you're
I would
gonna say 100% being a total expert, I'm like a 45%. I don't know why we're doing a percentage on what level of expertism you have. Josh, where do you think you fall at the percentage of?
I think there's always, there's always someone gonna know more than you.
Always someone gonna know more.
Like, oh, I know, and then someone's gonna be like, well, did you know, whatever. But I've been a huge Final Fantasy fan basically from early childhood and till now, like still going. So at the very least, I have grown up with it and I never miss an installment. So I would say, I'd say I'm pretty high up there. I'll say like 90%. There's a lot of like random facts and just random specific dates or names. I don't really worry about that too much, but I just enjoy the games a lot and they have a deep meaning to me. So.
Okay, all right. 90% expert. So if you have 100, sound off in the chat. And
there's gonna be hundreds. There's gonna be 120s. There's gonna be 200s. Limit break, all that.
I would say I'm residing at about a 5% because I have I've been a fan of games, so I've like seen them in the media. I could call out like some specific characters like that are pretty memorable, and pretty like stand up of the franchise like that you see a lot. And then I did just play the demo, actually. I haven't gotten into the game itself because I was gone on vacation, but I have played the demo, so I feel like, I know what's going on there a little bit, sort of. We'll get into that later. But yeah, I'm probably about 5%. So you've got a span of knowledge in this episode today. You've got 5 to 90%.
Yeah.
Fun fact, Kayla, Lightning, the character you're cosplaying as, is voiced by... What's her name? It just left me. Ali Hillis. I think that's her name. And she also voices Liara in Mass Effect.
Ooh.
Actually, did not know that. So that's good.
Yep.
90. Now you have 91%, Josh.
91%. I just leveled up.
And if you're listening and not actually watching the video, please go, if you're listening to the podcast version, go at least take a look at our social media.
Yeah, I will say...
and just this is going to be a very visual podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I know typically for podcasts, it's good you want to make it accessible to people watching or listening. This one, I would say, definitely listen, but try to look it up if you can.
Yeah, which, that being said, Josh has come prepared, you guys. First of all, thank you, Jerica. Jerica ordered these wonderful wigs for us. Very stylish. Very hairspray. Jerica said she was crying earlier.
It was burning my eyes really bad, but then it stopped. So I think it's fine now. But for a minute there, I was like, oh, God, this is bad. Like, my eyes feel like they're about to just jump out of the sockets because they're like, ow, 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 burning.
Late from lunch in the chat said, is Jerica Raikou?
Could be.
Are you Raikou?
Could be. Could
I think,
be.
what did you say earlier, Josh? That you
Seymour.
I thought she was going for Seymour.
That's who I do like his look more, but I messed up the style. I think
No,
his
it
hair
looks
is
great.
Thank you. Yeah. I could be whoever you want me to be.
I will say they all kind of have the
I know
same
who-
like
See,
swoop.
me and Brian, late from lunch, we share a similar love for Final Fantasy VIII. So he's referencing a Final Fantasy deep cut FF8 character.
Okay,
Not
okay,
that deep,
okay.
but not that many people like.
I
FF8,
recognize that name from Kingdom
Yeah.
Hearts, which we might not even get into.
Well-
That's a whole other
well-
podcast.
It will be mentioned.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, thank you, Jerica. Jerica, shout out. We're doing the acknowledgments up front. Jerica, shout out for the wigs. Josh has prepared an extensive keynote for us. So that's why he was saying, like, if you can watch a video, definitely do, because there are going to be some visual indicators. But let's go ahead and get housekeeping out of the way really quick. Our loadout, our Final Fantasy loadout. Let's get our, what is it, the
Wow.
key? Not the key, that's Kingdom Hearts. The blade, the big.
The Buster Sword. Let's do that.
Yeah. So we're gonna put that on. Get ready. So if you don't already, make sure to follow us over on Instagram and Twitter. It's just jkgames podcast, as well as on Twitch. Check us out there if you want to see our episodes live. Interact with us. We love when you guys do that. And we do upload our video after the fact on YouTube, which is also just jkgames podcast. So make sure to check us out there. You can always email us any of your concerns. If you have any episode recommendations, it's just jkgamespodcast@gmail.com. Jerica, what is Jerica holding? What is that?
It's a fake candle.
That looks.
That's why I was
A
touching
fake?
it, and they're like, "Wow, she's a true Final
I thought
Fantasy
it was real.
character because she can touch fire."
Hi, Audrey in the chat. Do you love our final looks? Yeah, definitely check us out there. And normally this episode's gonna be a little bit different. We're spending majority of our time on Final Fantasy. Normally we lay our episodes out in 3 different modes. Our easy mode, we were talking about what we've been playing. We have all been playing Final Fantasy, so that's what we're here to talk about today.
Actual episode.
Special episode. And then our normal mode, we normally talk about news. There is definitely some news, but we'll take care of that in our next episode. We got things to talk about this week. In our expert mode, which is all Final Fantasy led by Josh. But before we get into that, we do have just a little, Jerica, give us a little taste about what you've been doing this last week. You know, we're going to dip our toes in a little bit.
If you follow us on any social medias, is that what the kids say? I had a chance to be on Kind of Funny last week, so it was really cool. Once again, just a super surreal experience. I can't wait to talk a little bit about.
I watched a lot of it. It was you were on 2 days. It was 4 hours each. I tried to make it through a lot of it. It was long.
Yeah, it didn't.
But I'm impressed.
It
You
went
did
by
really well.
It went by really fast. But yeah, I'm still trying to recap it in my brain.
Yeah.
And I know on the next episode, Kayla, I will go through just sort of like my emotional state, what I learned, what I want to do. I learned a lot from just watching them and observing just how the sausage is made. Yeah. And really just, I don't know, like being even in a, surrounded by other people that do this for a living, obviously like have a lot of, what's the word I'm looking? Insight. They've had success. They're obviously super successful. I don't know. And just
top of the industry.
Yeah, and just listening to them and how they work is the most interesting part. So, and of course, I walked in, I felt like, I was welcomed and just part of their day. So, yeah, like I said, 10 out of 10 would recommend. And if you'd like to watch me talk, and I've already forgotten what we talked about already. It's just, it'll come back to me soon as I come down from the high. But, it was a good time. The set's gorgeous. The set is beautiful. I'll quit talking about it now. Like I said, I don't really have like all my thoughts together about it yet.
Fair. That's fair.
Because I just literally got back home. Like, it's like
she did.
going back home. And yeah, really just played Final Fantasy, forgot the whole week happened. Not because I didn't want to, not because I wanted to forget it, just because it was a lot to take in.
Yeah.
So
also, if you are following us from that, definitely let us know if you are a best friend in the chat. and that you came from there. So I'm really excited to hear more about Jerica's experience once she gathers her thoughts and everything. Funny, crazy thing is I was also on, like, I was gone. I was on a cruise ship. So I was like trying to watch like on a little screen in the sun. I was like I was like, ah! I did watch a good bit of it though. It was awesome. So
Yeah, check it
thank you for
out. It's
sharing.
on Kind of Funny. I think I was on there Tuesday and Wednesday.
Yeah.
So good times. And I even did a little stream with Nick and Andy. We played Outlast Survives, and
Oh,
that was a good old time. You
That
know,
was
like
so funny.
I enjoy being scared. It seems that it might have traumatized them, and that game is sort of hard. It's a little bit difficult.
It is. We played it. If y'all want to go watch us play it, we had to. It took us like an hour to figure it out. Josh was in our chat watching us. It was really actually pretty difficult. But thank you for sharing, Jerica. I am looking forward to hearing more about it. And you guys can go check out. She uploaded some pictures on our social media if you guys want to go check it out there. But yeah, Josh, take it away. Tell us.
oh my gosh.
Start from wherever you want to start.
So
You know?
I've been on your show a few times. Sometimes I
Yeah.
get really rambly. Of course, now you're basically telling me like, oh, just talk about Final Fantasy for like an entire episode. So
Yep.
I'm also just very delirious, lack of sleep in general. So
Why is that?
I went viral on TikTok, but not for any video game related thing. For making candy, because I've been started a candy and tea company. Just started, so
Yeah.
nothing really was going on with it. But a post recently went viral. It's up to over 500,000 views, and just orders are just going crazy. The only reason I even have time to do this really is because I actually ran out of some. I didn't expect to go viral. Who does? I ran out of some
Yeah.
materials. It's coming in tomorrow, so I can start finishing. So this is the only gap in my schedule. In fact,
We fit him in.
this is- This is how crazy it is. I haven't even been able to play Final Fantasy 16 yet. It's killing me because I bought it. I went to the store and bought it, and it was like right when I went viral. And so then by the time I got home, I was like, what is even happening? And then honestly, since then till like right this moment, it's been a blur. Last night I stayed up really late making some of this presentation just because like my brain is kind of mushed. And so I needed like to have an organized system to be able to talk about this a little bit.
Yeah.
Without it just being like, crazy. So, we'll try
Definitely.
best. I'll tell you like what some of the goals is. Just basically this came up because of you mostly saying that, Final Fantasy 16 was coming out. And first of all, you said, which Final Fantasy is this? Because the Roman numerals are kind of confusing.
I don't.
And-
This is kind of a fun fact about me is that I do not understand Roman numerals. I did not learn them in school, so like you
Whoa.
could literally, yeah, it's crazy, right? I didn't learn them. And so when I became an adult and like stuff started being in Roman numerals, I was like, I don't know what this is.
Well,
Like,
I
don't
grew up
even-
in Rome, so it was
Oh,
pretty.
nice.
I'm just kidding. That's a lie.
And so what I said is, I've been wanting to talk about Final Fantasy somewhere. I don't have a good platform. My TikTok is apparently a candy TikTok. Can't talk about Final Fantasy there. And I don't really have.
I didn't mean to stop you. I'm gonna interrupt you.
Yeah,
I'm
go
so
ahead.
sorry, but I just want to know, like your video on TikTok,
Yeah,
like how many views do you have? Like, what is considered viral in your book?
It's like 550,000 views or something.
Holy!
Wow.
I mean, thousands of whatever
Smokes.
the metrics are, likes and
Yeah,
whatever shares and orders, and it's crazy.
that's insane, dude. Well, congrats. That's
It's
awesome.
giving me anxiety. I just want to play Final Fantasy 16. But it's
Well,
a
if
good
you guys,
problem to have.
you guys should go follow Josh's TikTok. His company TikTok is
It's
Langley Tea Farms.
Yeah,
right?
Langley Tea Farms on there, and you can order, but just be patient. I'm working through all the orders right now.
Yeah. Got a plug. We'll plug at the end too.
That's the plug. So for Final Fantasy, this, as I alluded to at the beginning, this series I started playing as a young man, and I just like it really impacted me. So and I realize there's people like Kayla where like you don't know anything about it, and it's been intimidating. I understand that because you're seeing like Final Fantasy Roman numerals, you don't know what it is even. It's 16.
And I'm like, oh, I'm very behind.
Like, I can't play 16 because I haven't played 1 through 15 yet, and I was like, no, like you can play any of them, and I'm like literally not that like I think you should skip one, but like it literally doesn't matter because they're totally independent of each other. They don't, even though they're numbered, they don't actually relate to each other, which we'll talk about why in a second. But
you have a lot of questions.
So the whole point of the stream that I want to do, I thought would be fun, is like we have me that kind of like knows a lot about it. We have Jerica who knows a medium amount, and we have you that it's like the three Goldilocks and the three bears, you know, in the porridge temperatures, and then you know nothing about it. And I think there might be some other people that are also intimidated by this new game coming out, but they might want to check it out.
Yeah.
They don't know anything about it. And
Let us know in the chat
we're gonna
what your availability is. What do you know? What do you not know?
demystify some of it. I think by the end of this, I just want it to be a little more clear where you can feel confident and not scared of it, and just understand like what the series stands for, I guess, and like what the point is. And maybe you'll hear a game that you would like to try, because I do think a lot of these still hold up to this day, even if they're older. And so maybe you want to start with 7, maybe you want to start with 6, maybe you want to start with 12, like whatever. If we describe them, whatever, you might want to be interested. But I will say there's a lot of games in it, and we're not like trying to spend all night, so we are going to move a little fast and just kind of just hang out. We're just hanging out, talking about Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about my personal experiences with it. When Jerica has some, she'll talk about hers. And I think we're late from lunch. The chat says don't start with 12. We're going to go in chronological order, but with exception, I think we're going to start at the end because we all played the demo. Well, Jerica, have you played the game yet?
What, 16?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Besides the demo.
Okay, oh, yes. Great. Oh, yes.
I've been busy. I haven't, and Kayla hasn't. So what I'd like to do is, before we start, I want to like talk about the demo real quick. And let's start with Kayla. I want to hear from your perspective, as you've never touched a Final Fantasy game. You didn't even know before we even stream. Even though she beat the demo, she said, "Wait, which demo was this again? Like what number?" Because she didn't. Yeah, she's like, "What game did I even play?" So this is very interesting. I'm actually very curious to hear. Me and you read a lot of books too, and you're usually good about like having insight about this stuff and like analyzing it. So I want to hear about your demo experience and what you thought and what some of your impressions were and some of the themes, because at the end of this, I want to revisit this and see if you maybe notice a pattern with what was in the demo versus what I've kind of explained about Final Fantasy.
That's a great question. Okay, cool. So no pressure, me going first. I like Josh said, I read a lot of books. I read a lot of specifically fantasy books. This demo, which I really like that this demo was really just the beginning of the game and like a snippet of the game. And what is really cool is that it just translates into the game when you get the game.
This is basically the intro.
Yeah, which is cool because like that's I've only played like me and Jerica actually had a whole episode dedicated to demos and like what we want out of demos and like what we think is good, like what kind of demos like are beneficial to do I want to buy this game or no. This I feel like was a great example of like a perfect demo because me literally I'm like the test subject number 0 because like I know nothing about this franchise and it sold me from the demo from the first 2 hours. So I think they ended it at like the exact correct point. And like all had things that are involved in this first like little bit to get me hooked as someone who doesn't know what's going on. But like Josh said, nobody knows what's going on at this point. So because this is actually a challenge for me specifically because I'm used to reading books and like I played some fantasy games, like specifically, but nothing really truly like this, I feel like. So I'm used to starting something very like linear, you know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, it's a build up. I'm like, okay, yeah, so I know this and I know that, like I know what's going on already. And so I feel like this
game,
this
demo it drops you in. It drops you in. It throws you in.
And, some books are like that too. And a lot of games, like there have been other games I've played that are like that.
I think I guess demo spoilers, I guess too. It even near the beginning, you start and you're controlling a creature, fighting another creature, right?
Yeah.
And then it just cuts away, and you're like, "What was that?" And then it cuts away, but then it gets to that point back again, right? So it jumps back into like where maybe you have a little more context. So actually, speaking of that, before we talk about any kind of gameplay related to the Final Fantasy 16 demo, what were your thoughts about like the world?
So I was talking to another friend, and it described it perfectly. It's like an anime Game of Thrones kind of thing.
Okay, yeah.
So, and it really does feel like that kind of era. Like you're in, like there's political intrigue. There's like these, I forget the Roses something.
Yeah, that's their kingdom.
And so you're kind of seeing like, you're walking around this like village type tavern situation. Like there's like people, like in the background churning butter kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's beautiful. First of all, that's one of the first things I noticed is like how gorgeous the game looked, and like,
Okay. Yeah.
and it did kind of, I don't know, some of the way the characters are designed. We're sitting here today, like wearing these wigs. It's very like specific. You're like, oh, these are
Yeah.
like, but it doesn't really match like the background that's going on. I feel like, I don't know.
Reason. We'll talk about that. There's a reason for
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
actually.
I'm very curious, but I did definitely notice that. I was like, okay, like this doesn't really match the dialogue and like some of the dialogue I think does, but I was like, and you jump in and you start sparring, and I'm like, okay, this guy's like you're Clive, you're like, okay, yeah, and he's got this family dynamic that's going on with his little brother who,
his mom.
and who's like heir to the throne, and his mom doesn't like him.
Yeah.
And like, so I was like, okay, I'm a big fan of family dynamics. Definitely got a lot of that going on here, and specifically sibling dynamics between the two brothers. So I don't know. Immediately, it grouped me pretty quickly, and the way that it the combat is also something that like I'm not like normally someone who plays that. What would you even call that? I guess it's turn-based combat. It's a combination between turn-based combat and like.
So normally it is. This is a little more action-oriented, but yes, it has roots in that.
Because you can see like what move that the enemy is using.
Yes, correct. It's called telegraphing. Yeah, you can see what he's about to cast or use. Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
It's giving Pokemon, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. Interesting. Yeah. One more specific leading question. What about in the story or how it was presented? Some of the more magical or mystical elements.
Yeah. So like it kind of reminded me a little bit about like. This is just something that I'm a fan of personally, like Attack on Titan or like Titanfall, where you like transform,
right?
Like that kind of thing.
Huge. Do you remember the name of these things?
Oh yes.
It's spelled weird.
No.
That's icons, right?
Yeah.
It's like EIKONS. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was calling them Akon.
Acons.
Like
I think some people might say that.
Like the singer.
I would need to look at what they say in Japanese, whatever. Oh, that's the other thing about this podcast, by the way. Do not, I mean, you can correct the pronunciation if you want, but it's all going to be all over the place.
Yeah.
There's crazy names and towns and whatever.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that the magic really intrigued me. I feel like I could tell like the lore. I feel like I was picking up by the end. I feel like I had picked up on the general consensus that like there's these like almost like deities that like harness power from the like statue. Is it statue? Some sort of like
there was like a mother crystal mentioned, right?
Crystal. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah,
that's like crystal. In a weird territory, and it's like contentious and. Yeah.
So I feel like, and especially since I'm sure you'll mention this. I don't know if this is across all Final Fantasy games, but what's it called where you can click and see like what's going on in the UI that you can see.
Oh
like,
yeah, that's new to this. In the cutscenes in this game, you can kind of pause the cutscene and just get like information about places and people, which really helps in this one.
Yeah, so that's really helpful. You can press on like the D-pad and like see like hover over people's name and see what's going on, and that was really helpful for sure. And it was nice to know like what I should know at that point and what I shouldn't, that kind of thing. Because I was trying not to focus too much on like, okay, should I know like what this person's intentions are, like what's going on here. So I feel like overall it had a really great balance between gameplay that was interesting and story that was interesting. So
yeah. What about Jerica? What was your impression? Let's just go with the demo since you went past it, but what do you think?
Oh, sorry, I was adding a video, a little trailer from 16.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I should have put something. You got me though.
I got. So my first impressions of 16.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just from the demo, kind of.
Okay.
Or the intro.
Yeah. Don't worry. I no spoilers here. I have to say it's been a while since I have cared about a Final Fantasy game. Yeah, I think the last one that I really got into was, I mean, technically Final Fantasy VII Remake. Was the last one I'm into. That was the latest. That's the latest new game, right? Technically, besides this one.
Yeah, correct.
So let me make sure this loops. Okay. But yeah, so Final Fantasy VII Remake had me already, just because it's always been a unicorn of a game to get remade. It's originally for the PlayStation 1. So that sort of got me back into playing, like being excited about new Final Fantasy games. I didn't play a lot of 15. I didn't. I'm gonna go ahead and say this. I didn't give it a chance. I never even tried to play. Just from the trailers and the cutscenes and what I saw of other people playing, the story, the environment, the situation that was going on in that game didn't really speak to me. So I never got to it. But since playing Final Fantasy VII and just sort of and I can't remember, was 15 turn-based or was it also the action-y?
It was also action.
Okay. Is that really the first Final Fantasy game where they sort of changed up, like?
Well, it's up for debate. There's we'll talk about it. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll hold that question for later. But Final Fantasy VII Remake just obviously got me interested again. So when I saw 16, and I'm going to be honest, even the first trailer for 16 really didn't sell me on it just yet, because I'm not a big medieval fantasy fan. Like, that's not, like, I'm more of space, sci-fi, weird, ghost, scary stuff. Like, that's what I'm really into. And then, like, in Final Fantasy, it's always been, like, the techie side has always...
a mixture, and we'll talk about that, too. It's interesting,
I like the more futuristic...
There's a mixture of fantasy and sci-fi.
Steampunk type of Final Fantasy, whimsical, has always got me, but this just seemed very Game of Thronesy. I hate to throw out Game of Thronesy. Again, that's the adjective I'm using. But I am so thankful for the demo because you and everybody else was raving about playing the demo. So I was like, all right, I guess really people talking about the demo got me to play it. Everybody said this is so freaking good. So I played the demo and literally the time went by so fast. And at the end of it, I was really sad I couldn't keep playing because the story beat ended in a perfect way.
In a very, like, a cliffhanger.
Oh yeah.
And you almost feel like it gave you too much info, but it didn't. Yeah. There's still a lot to understand. But the gameplay was great. I like the mechanics of he's got an ability where you can sort of teleport, like, or just get to the enemy a little like super fast.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
That's
I really
fun,
liked that.
jumping around and doing that. I thought that was cool. And then just the combos and using your, I call it, here's my Destiny speak, but using your super that you get.
Yeah, sure.
Every few minutes, just making sure you're timing all of those attacks appropriately. Got really addicting fast.
Dodging, perfect dodge.
Oh yeah, you got your perfect dodge.
It's very satisfying.
Slows down time. And, those are the types of things that hook me pretty quickly, especially when it's like a big boss fight, which in the demo, you have a couple. The boss fight that I'm talking about was the one in the pond, where you have to get...
And that, by the way, is a classic Final Fantasy enemy that goes back like 20-something years.
That's crazy.
This is some of the things where you'll see like little repeats of... If you're familiar, if you're new to it, like Kayla, you just, that's a cool monster. But if you've been playing for a while, you're like, I know this.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, regardless, it's fun to play. The boss fight so far, pretty dope. The cinematic, quick time events are
I love
dope
those.
as hell. Like I got the music cranked up. I got the sound, surround sound, like, turned up, amplified. It looks great in HDR.
That dragoon in the castle and the cinematic kind of moments, the quick time events.
And it's such an iconic thing, like in a Final Fantasy game, like during the cutscenes. They have like the health bar is still up there, like during all the cutscenes. So it just, I don't know. There's something very aesthetically just badass about it. Obviously the cutscene itself, but just the UI of everything is just.
I agree.
It's dope. It's so much fun. I can't wait to keep playing it.
We're gonna move on and just start talking about the series as a whole in a second. But yeah, I agree with all of what you've said. I really enjoyed the demo. I hope I can play the real one soon. The voice acting is really good.
Yes,
which is
I agree.
Not necessarily the case in all of these games. Voice acting is
cool.
Good. Okay. So anyway. Before we start too, this is interesting. This was on the front page of the Final Fantasy subreddit today, and and basically it says, for the podcast people, it's like a little meme. It says, "Don't mess with us FF fans. We hate every game in the franchise." So I've been on kind of
What?
blackout with FF16. I only watched like the first trailer, something, but I like to play games, experience them, form my own opinions and thoughts, and then I like to go to the community. Same with books. Like I don't even like to read the back of a book. I like to read the book and then think about it, and then I go and look up what people think. And sometimes it's very surprising because I'm like, what in the world? I thought the exact opposite. But apparently, this game's already divisive amongst fans. Some people hate it, some people love it.
It's probably the reason I love it.
I
People hate it.
I haven't looked into it or whatever. But I did want to say, because anytime I'm saying oh, I'm a Final Fantasy expert, we're going to talk about Final Fantasy. I think some people might be ready for some hot takes, right? Because we're in a hot take culture right now, where everyone's like, you got to bash everything.
Well, I mean, you look the part right now to give us all the hot takes.
One thing I thought,
You do.
and this is timely. You were just on Kind of Funny. One thing I appreciate about Kind of Funny and the fan base, the best friends and everything, I like the good vibes. It's not as toxic. Everything's good vibes. And so same thing with tonight. We're going to be talking about kind of each Final Fantasy game. Some of them just very briefly. We're just kind of quick, high level. But I'm not really here for hot takes because this is my hot take. I actually like every Final Fantasy main series game. That's my hot take.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Vehemently disagree with that. But I love Final Fantasy. I have all my props. I have every game here sitting, right next to me, all loaded up. And so, it's just going to be good vibes. We're just cruising. If you're here in the chat, tell us about your favorite Final Fantasies. Kayla put a poll out earlier and got some, so we'll talk about that in a second, but let's just keep it moving for now. What is Final Fantasy? Oh boy, can I even just tell you what Final Fantasy is? So by the end of this, like I said, I just hope you have a general understanding of even though each game is different, there are some very specific overarching themes. I'm going to do a quick exposition here. We're just going to do lore dump some and go over a few bullet points.
I love a good lore dump.
Storytelling. Obviously, this is obvious. Final Fantasy is about storytelling, and I'll go through some of these points and we'll talk about it a little bit more. Art and music. Obviously, every video game is storytelling, art, and music, right? Duh. But there's a reason why I'm specifically calling these out, because there's a certain vibe that Final Fantasy has that we'll talk about. Characters and villains. Obviously, you see this hair, you already know who I am. Well, maybe, but yeah, you already know. The characters and villains of Final Fantasy are some of the most iconic in gaming. They've made it to Smash Brothers and crossover events all over. Very cool. Technology. And by that, I mean, one of the big things about Final Fantasy as a series is for many years, each game was almost like an industry event because they tried to push the envelope on the available gaming technology that they had to them at the time. And this is a tradition that has been going on since basically the beginning of it. And so each game, it would be and we'll talk about why that kind of has lessened over the years, but for a long time, each game was a huge deal, a huge event. Everyone's like, what's this going to be? Look at what they've done. And they would kind of set the bar for mini games that would copy their format. So a lot of, even though Kayla might not have played Final Fantasy, you might have played very many games that have been based on or inspired by some kind of thing that they innovated on. So very interesting.
Okay.
That's a big one. Systems, meaning jobs, battling, and leveling systems. Another interesting thing, and I think this is part of the reason why some fans are so toxic. I won't use the word toxic because everyone can have an opinion, but I think this is one of the reasons why some fans are so heated when discussing Final Fantasy, is because each Final Fantasy is actually very different from each other. They go out of their way to try something new, to try something different. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it does. And so a lot of times you'll have some Final Fantasy games that are very similar and people will like it. And then all of a sudden the next game that comes out is just way different. And people are like, well, I can't believe they're doing this. I wish it was like this previous one because that previous one was better. But other people this is their new Final Fantasy game. So I think that's also what gives it wide appeal. It would almost be how some bands, they release an album and then the next album's some totally crazy different experimental album. It's kind of that kind of a vibe.
Almost like a different genre of music.
Yeah, exactly. So you have fans of different kind of things.
Taylor
and so
Swift.
to me, this is an exciting thing to look forward to because each game I'm like, oh, what's the battle system going to be like? Oh, like how are you going to level up or progress in this game? And it's very different each time. It's not the same every time. It's not like a Mario game or an Animal Crossing game where it's like each one is just the same kind of thing like over and over again.
Interesting.
Summons. This is I'll have another slide after this about this specifically, but I'm using the word summons, but what you've experienced in Final Fantasy 16 as icons, this is a consistent element within the Final Fantasy series, which are these almost like they're like deities, or I think more in like if you're familiar with Greek mythology, maybe more like the Titans, where they're not really
Yeah,
gods
Titanfall.
themselves, but there's some kind of powerful force of nature that
Pokemon.
exists above like humanity, but they're not necessarily gods. It's just like a represent. Usually, it's affiliated with some kind of natural force. We'll talk about it a little more.
Okay.
Is there a Tornadus? Like the tornado Pokemon?
There's a wind one, Garuda. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Crystals and magic. Big part of Final Fantasy is magic in general. That's another exciting thing is like how is magic going to present in this new Final Fantasy game, or like each one is like a little bit different how they handle it. Crystals is a tentpole aspect of Final Fantasy. Crystals, you'll see it in the themes everywhere in the stories all throughout. So you might have noticed that already, right? In 16, there's a big mother crystal, and they're all trying to figure out like who owns it, who owns the land that it's in. From day one, the very first Final Fantasy, crystals is a pivotal part of the storyline.
Okay, good to know. Good to know.
Yep. Airships, big one. Oh, and Moogles and Chocobos. So airships, like kind of like Jerica was saying, there's a lot of like medieval tech as well as kind of like sci-fi tech, and so like pirate ships that can fly, or maybe even just more technological like airships. There's even actual spaceships and rocket ships. That's a common theme, like just airships and stuff. And then Moogles and Chocobos, they're in like every game. They're cute. They're super cute.
They are.
Chocobos are basically they're horses, but they're birds. So yeah, for your horse girl kind of energy. In Final Fantasy, it's birds, big birds you ride on, like big ostrich birds.
I would trade in my car for a Chocobo.
Yeah. And then Moogles they're kind of like look like little teddy bear koala things with little antenna on their head, and they're really cute too. They're in a lot of games. And so yeah, and what I was talking about with like story, I want to go back to like the storytelling, the art, and the music. This is like very important to the thing about Final Fantasy is like these stories, this is what got me into like it's like my first like I guess adult kind of stories, like when I was a kid playing Final Fantasy, and these characters go through like trauma and deal with tragedies and deal with like all these very specific things.
Oh yeah, so far.
And and it's very interesting. Just as a kid, I was like, what is going on, and like learning about all this. And so this was like my introduction to kind of like dealing with these kind of like more advanced, or like I guess you'd say adult mature emotions and stuff. And art and music is a huge part of Final Fantasy. They've used the same kind of concept artist for this entire time. His last name is Amano, and he does all this beautiful concept work. And then we'll talk about some of the composers later. I mean, I could do a whole thing on music. We're not even really talking about music tonight, but the music in Final Fantasy is just representative of like some of the best music in the video game industry, and it has that reputation it has to live up to, and it's consistently done that like throughout the years. So that's kind of what I'm referencing there.
I definitely noticed that already.
Yeah. So Summons, this is actually a picture, some concept art from the Final Fantasy 16 icons, but a lot of these have been consistent throughout the series. And they obviously represent like different elemental things. So you have, whether it's fire or ice or electricity or wind or, water or different things, you have kind of these entities that represent those things.
Fire has been what we've only seen so far in the demo.
Because in the demo there's actually 2 of them, which that's only really like a 16 thing. That's what I mean. Like it's not presented the same way. So like when he's like, oh, there's only can be 2 fire things. That's just something in Final Fantasy 16 that they decided to say. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. And then real quick, obviously I don't really want this whole podcast to be full of like names and dates and like that too much, because it's just gonna make it more confusing. But we do need to acknowledge some key people without like I'm not trying to undermine like there's obviously hundreds of people involved in Final Fantasy throughout the years, but there's a couple key people to keep in mind throughout this. That would be Sakaguchi and Uematsu. Sakaguchi is like the George Lucas of Final Fantasy. He is the one that created it. He created it, okay? And he was the director of 1 through 9, so a lot of them.
Wow.
Final Fantasy 1 through 9. He created Final. It's his baby. He created and directed it. Nobuo Uematsu was the main composer from very start 1 through 9 again. Basically, they worked hand in hand, them two together, right? So 1 through 9 was all, again, huge teams behind these people. Different people even directed them. Some people wrote them, different things, but these are the kind of two people worked hand in hand between directing it and doing the music that really made 1 through 9. Okay. Then you have Nomura, Kitase, and Nojima. There's some crossover between them and Sakaguchi and Uematsu, and some of the games where all of these people worked on together are some of the best Final Fantasy games, being mostly 7, 8, and 9, which are held in extremely high regard. Nomura, very famous right now. You can already tell. This is an old photo of him, but he looks like many Final Fantasy characters.
He does. Yes.
He is one of the designers he designed Cloud's design. He designs a lot of Final Fantasy characters. He also is the main designer and writer for Kingdom Hearts. So a lot of that vibe with Sora and like the chains and big shoes and the buckles and stuff. This is his aesthetic. A lot of the modern Final Fantasy aesthetic is ode to Nomura. Final Fantasy VII Remake, he is kind of in charge of it right now. And Kitase is involved too. And so like a lot of that aesthetic is leaking through. There's a lot of controversy of that because he has an interesting storytelling kind of way he tells stories. It's very convoluted, very anime.
I do love anime.
And then more recently you have Yoshida and Soken. These are, I would kind of say, these are like the new Sakaguchi and Uematsu. Yoshida is the director of actually he didn't direct it, sorry, but he is the producer of Final Fantasy 16 as well as 14, the online game, and Soken was the composer of 14 and new 16. So this is like the new school kind of the new talent kind of coming in and taking over things for this new era. So yes,
something noteworthy. I see a lot of men. I don't see a lot of women.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Again, not to downplay all the people involved in making these games, but first of all, the video game industry as a whole, as you know, traditionally it was mostly male. Throughout the years has gotten much better. I would say, and this is just me kind of just speaking off the top of my head, I would say the Western divisions are a little bit better at that compared to Eastern developers. Some of it is just societal. Japanese society is still way more traditional than other Western societies, like European or American societies. Their gender roles are kind of like still like in the 50s and 60s in some ways. That said, this is very interesting. There are a lot of key women contributors to Final Fantasy. Yoko Shimomura specifically is one of my favorite composers in video games. She did the whole soundtrack for Final Fantasy 15. It is really good. And one of the main writers for some of the Final Fantasy 14 expansion packs is a woman who rose in the ranks from just writing little side quests to being in charge of writing the entire thing. And some of those are like some of the first Final Fantasy games I actually cried at the end. So women are coming in and making a big impact. And I will say this, even though, yes, this is a picture of a bunch of Japanese men. Final Fantasy is actually known to have very strong female empowerment and female characters, and especially within the industry and for the times that these games came out within the context.
Okay, cool.
So even though the dev team maybe is lacking diversity, some of the games kind of make up for that. There's a lot of controversy over some things, but I would say their female characters are really good in general. And it's good. But it was a great question. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
Real quickly, another thing I just made up off the top of my head. Have you ever heard of like the Disney eras?
Yes.
Like, whatever, different eras of Disney animation. I thought of like, what would that look like for Final Fantasy? So I just kind of made this up off the top of my head.
This is
just
new.
So you can see a list of
new
the games
Josh lore. Lore.
Yeah, we're doing
dump.
this is a quick. We're just going through this real quick so we can talk about
Let's
a little bit
go.
about the games. So I have what I call the early era. This is Final Fantasy 1, 2, and 3. These are on the NES. It came out in 87, 88, and 90.
That actually, the first one came out before I was born. Wow.
Yeah, they're old. They came out really fast. These are
We just
all for
called
the
you old,
NES.
Jerica.
Oh, I know.
This is what I call the early era. The next era, I have what's called the classic era. This is Final Fantasy 4, 5, and 6. These were for the Super Nintendo system. My first Final Fantasy that I really played was 4. But I didn't really like latch on it too heavily until 6. I was obsessed, and that's 6 is the first time I realized like a video game was like more than just like Mario or Pac-Man or that kind of thing. Like there's like a depth to it. We'll talk about that in a second. I'm going through these real quick. The next I have what's called the golden era. This is 7, 8, and 9. This is what I alluded to when there's crossover with some of these talent and producers. These 3 games, when they came out, they blew the industry away wide open. So many copycats after that. A lot of JRPGs, meaning Japanese RPGs in general, are basically copying something from this era that they kind of created or innovated on. Next, I'm calling the modern era. This is 10, 11, and 12. You can notice too, most of these are following kind of console lines. If you see like what console these are out, the modern era of PS2 games. So this is when they're experimenting now with voice acting, with 3D, more 3D environments and 3D battles and that kind of stuff. The next era I'm calling the divisive era. This is 13, 14, and 15. These games are a little bit divisive, and we'll talk about that a little more when we go through it. And then the last one I'm calling the revival era, which is 14 again. We'll talk about that. And 16. This is a new kind of era. We're going to see where it goes. We don't know. It's revival. I don't know if that's good or bad yet. We're going to see, but they're really trying to reboot it in a sense. And so that's what we're going to see. Now, one thing I would like to point out before I move on from this is just it's still, I understand I'm trying to make Final Fantasy simple, but so far I'm just making it more confusing.
No, I think it's pretty. I understand. I understand.
Basically, do you notice anything, especially looking at maybe the dates or anything, the gaps? Do you notice something kind of interesting if you just look at the dates here?
Well, it's been 10 years since one has been made.
Essentially, yes. So they used to crank these things out, and what I call Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 are some of the best Final Fantasy games in the series, and it blows my mind that it came out in 1997, 1999, and 2000, just one right after another, just hit, like they nailed it each time. Amazing. Part of this is because of some of the complexity of the gaming industry as a whole. It's way harder to make a video game now than it was back then. It was still hard, but it's insane now, the budget's involved. And so, yeah, you can see there's huge gaps. In the divisive era, you have 2009, then 2010, and then 2016. So it gets, starts to have huge jumps. We'll talk about that a little. But one last confusing thing before we move on. This is the most confusing part, and I promise it'll be simpler. Naming problems. Okay.
First of all, Roman numerals problem.
This is part of the problem that we got to clear this up before we move on. Final Fantasy, this on the left side, this is Japan. These are the names in Japan. On the right side, we're gonna have America. So when Final Fantasy came out in Japan, then they're like, okay, let's release it in America. It came out as Final Fantasy. That's what I have right here. Final Fantasy.
Whoa.
Very first one, right? Final Fantasy. Great. Okay. Final Fantasy 2 came out in Japan on the NES. And they're like, no, I don't think Americans will like this. Okay. So they didn't release it here. They didn't bring it out. Final Fantasy 3 came out. They're like, no, we're not bringing that out. So Final Fantasy 4 came out, and they're like, well, what the heck? We can't call Final Fantasy 4. They've only had one. So they released it as Final Fantasy 2. So
oh god,
interesting.
Final Fantasy 2 in the US is Final Fantasy 4. That's very confusing.
That is confusing.
So they're like, great, Final Fantasy 2 is great. Let's come out with Final Fantasy 5. Nope, not for Americans. So then Final Fantasy 6 came out, and they were like, yep, that's going to be Final Fantasy 3. And so we have Final Fantasy 3. That's great. So great.
Pretty.
And then things changed. There's some big drama between Square and Nintendo. They were supposed to be making the next one on the N64. This is a quick lore drop. Square was planning a huge big Final Fantasy game on the N64, and they were like, actually, Nintendo, you need to make your next system CD based because we want to we have all these big plans, and Nintendo didn't like the idea of CDs because you could copy them or burn them, like piracy, And so they're like, no, we're going to do cartridges. So Square actually said, okay, bye. We're not going to release Final Fantasy on Nintendo anymore. This was devastating to me. I was a huge Nintendo fan and a huge Final Fantasy fan. I was like, I cannot believe this. No, please don't leave Square. It felt like my parents were getting divorced. I'm sorry, that might be insensitive to some people who that actually happened to. But to my little child brain, this was a horrible, horrible thing.
Well, especially at the time, like consoles were, I mean, they're still expensive, but like it's not like you can just be like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go buy. Yeah.
And so Final Fantasy VII came out, and then they were like, actually, yeah, let's just reset it. And so Final Fantasy VII is Final Fantasy VII in the US. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 7 in the US, which is a little confusing. But they've since like ported all these games. All these games that say they didn't come out in the US, they've since made available, and they've redone all the numbering. So actually now it's correct. So now we just go by the Japanese numbering for everything.
Okay.
And so from this point on, the rest of tonight, I'm going to talk about them in the Japanese numbering.
Okay.
But that's what's confusing. Late from Lunch says he has the box. Humble brag. Yeah, I have the box. So that's how that goes. Okay.
That is very interesting. Huh.
We're going to zoom through some of these and just kind of like maybe you'll get a feel for Final Fantasy. Cool. So Final Fantasy 1, Final Fantasy, it comes out and it's really cool. Like you can walk around on a little map, and can you see my mouse cursor? I wonder.
Nope.
Okay, not on Discord. So you can walk around on a little map, and then you can explore this is what we call the overworld. An overworld map. That's another aspect of a lot of Final Fantasy games. Let me just tell you. Fast forward to Final Fantasy 16 demo. It does show you a little map, but you can't walk around as a little man. I don't like that. I want to walk around like a little man or woman, and the battles are turn-based, and so you go into these battles. It shows your characters kind of side by side, and you fight each other, and then you can explore little towns. That's what these pictures are, right? And the plot of Final Fantasy is the first one at least is like very simple. It's basically like there's elemental powers in the world that are controlled by 4 crystals. So there's
crystals.
Earth, fire, water, and wind. Earth, wind, fire. Earth, fire, water, and wind. And basically, those control these crystals in these like temples control the elements throughout the whole world. And so bad things start happening, like floods or fires or different things. And so you realize the crystals are getting corrupt that represent those elements. And so there's like prophecies where the 4 heroes gotta like bring balance to the world or whatever. So you have to go and find these like crystals and like basically like restore them essentially. And that's like the whole plot of like the first game. And you just go around and whatever. And so that kind of sets the tone, honestly, for that first game. This formula, this sets the tone for the rest of the series, even until 16. You can even see in 16 a lot of this, right? Where it's like, oh, there's this crystal, this mother crystal, and it's maybe something's wrong with it, or they got to go check it out. But this other territory controls it. That still has like some of this Final Fantasy 1 vibe to it, right? So even though I said like they're not connected, there's these threads that kind of tie into them. And there's like another thread that I didn't really mention is there's this kind of like anime storytelling thread where like a lot of the plot starts to get very convoluted traditionally, like towards the end of a lot of these games where it's like you're playing the game like, oh, this is really cool, and then the end suddenly it's just like crazy things happening. You're like, what is even happening anymore? Like I don't even understand what's going on. There's like all these games will be like, oh, suddenly there's like time travel, or like, oh, this dimension opened up, or like just like crazy things happen. So that's another kind of, I'd say, hallmark of this. In this one, I think there's like a time loop in this game, so it gets wild. So that's Final Fantasy 1. We're going to zoom through these first early era games. Final Fantasy 2, it looks very similar. It looks like this. It almost looks identical, and it has some of the same kind of overall kind of feel and vibe. There's a little bit more of a storyline, not just crystals, but there's like an empire, right? And this is another thing that is in a lot of Final Fantasy games is imperialism. Some people inaccurately attribute this to like, oh, this game's kind of like Star Wars because there's like an empire and you're like part of rebels that are fighting against the empire. But Star Wars actually
right when you said empire, I was like, oh,
yeah. Star Wars is actually based off of some traditional like Japanese like old movies, And this is actually a theme that comes out in Japanese media a lot. And part of it, there's many reasons. It has to do with their feudal background, but also if you think about like, not to get too much into history here, if you think about like World War II, post World War II, Imperial Japan being defeated and losing, and a lot of times in life, there's just citizens just trying to live their life, just trying to they're just trying to survive, we're just trying to live, and their governments or things are going on and crazy things are happening. And you'll see a lot of anime, a lot of Studio Ghibli films, a lot of Final Fantasy games have this recurring theme of like empires or evil kind of governments kind of like causing chaos in the world and having to be destroyed or overthrown. It's kind of interesting theme.
Okay.
Yeah.
Two.
Final Fantasy 2. 2, it pretty much looks like 1, right? It looks very similar to what we just looked at. There
It's
is
only
like
1 year later.
the plot is a little more involved with like political intrigue and like kingdoms and like different things. It is very fantasy feel to it, and it looks pretty much the same too as far as like how it plays, how it feels. Yeah,
didn't mean to interrupt. We have a couple of new followers in here. I just wanted to
great.
recognize Booze Bags, JD, and Mort Jenkins.
Hi.
Welcome to our class. This is a class. Josh is our teacher. I raised my hand, but I just asked the question while I was raising my hand. So I'm sorry. I'll go into the corner and have my timeout time.
Yeah,
we're gonna talk about
teacher
the good ones
Josh.
soon. We're just kind of zooming through these. And then you had Final Fantasy 3 again on the NES, 1990. It looks a little cooler. Here's a little crystal like temple. So you can see in all these games, there's like crystals happening, all this stuff's going on. Now, an important thing like in here is there's a job system in this. This is crucial to Final Fantasy. So this is like a little bit why I wanted to talk about this real quick. But basically, there's different like everyone starts off as like one job, and then as the game, and you can see this picture, they all kind of look the same. In the middle picture, like they're actually called Onion Knights, which is funny because that's like what they're called in Game of Thrones is an Onion Knight.
Oh yeah.
But they're called Onion Knights, and throughout the game as you play, you can start getting different kind of things where like maybe one is going to be more of a magic user, one's going to be more of a physical attack user. This becomes a hallmark of Final Fantasy. So 3 is where it's introduced. We did not get this in the US until way later when they decide to re-release it, and it's like at this point everything's available, but we did not get this naturally in the US till way later. Yes.
Booze Bags actually said in the chat, these are the games my dad would meet me when I got home from school to help him get through.
Aww.
Which Final Fantasy specifically, I wonder. Maybe you can reply.
And then he also says, or she, don't know, Booze Bags.
Right, sure.
Hey, you also helped your mom. Mom used me for Zelda and my dad for Final Fantasy. So
yeah, what Final Fantasy specifically? I want to hear about it.
Yeah.
Before we talk about 4, Kayla, in your poll, what were some of the people saying about what Final Fantasies they liked?
Well, here's the thing. I don't need to embarrass myself, so I pulled up a chart of Roman numerals to make sure I didn't.
There's nothing wrong with pulling up a chart. I had to ask Audrey. I'm like, the other day I was gonna make a post about playing 16. I was like, "What's that Roman numeral again?"
Yeah. Guys, if y'all are just joining, I don't know no Roman numerals like at all. So literally, like before.
What is this, Rome?
Yeah. Okay. So in on our poll we did on our social media, we asked what everyone's favorite Final Fantasy was. Friend of the show Pierce Oceanic 8 said Final Fantasy 8 was his favorite. No, 9. I'm sorry, 9.
9. Yeah. Okay.
9. Final Fantasy 9.
I'm writing them down so we can remember. What else?
Friend of the show, Chad. So Chad Michael Ennis, FF. Hold on, I have to reference my chart. 7 remake. Though I'm sure it'll be replaced by 16 from the sounds of it.
Okay.
And then we have Hurricane Tron said Final Fantasy 10 barely edges out 7.
Okay. 10. Yeah.
Then we had somebody respond with a few. Okay. So Blazer on Twitter said 7, 8, 9, 15, 12, and 16.
Oh, interesting. 7, 8, 9. That's that golden era, right? Of course. So, interestingly enough, you can almost tell what age someone is based on their favorite Final Fantasy, which is another thing. Because I think it's just like what you're playing when you're a certain age kind of influences your taste, right?
Yeah, and then we had a couple other ones. So Noelle Taco Bell, which is a she's been with us for a little bit, so shout out to her. First JRPG I beat all by myself when I was 12, Final Fantasy 7 is what she said. And then we
Seven's a
had
big one.
ECJ
Yeah, 7 when she was
89.
12. That's peak. This is like she's gonna I get it.
Okay. And then we also have ECG 89 said 8. Thank you for
8.
putting the number.
Great.
I
Another
appreciate
8.
it.
I love 8.
And then we also had the Trevor said Final Fantasy 10.
Okay, a lot of 10s, we got some 8s, some 9s.
Yeah, and then
so that's a 7, 8, 9, and 10. Interesting. Yeah, we can talk about those a little.
Where's
Yeah,
my
7,
love
8,
for
9,
10
and 10.
too? Hey, my
What's that?
10 2 lovers out there.
We'll talk about that just for you, Jerica. Kayla has no idea what's about to happen.
You have no idea, Kayla. It's about to get wild in here.
Then in the chat, Boozebag said it was these early NES into SNES games. So
Yeah.
it was late 80s into the 90s, middle school, high school years.
So and if it was in the U.S., the only NES one would have been, the first one. So here's the thing: when I do talk about like with you, Kayla, you're like, well, the one things with Kayla, if you're just joining, she didn't know which Final Fantasy to start with. She asked me because she's like 16's coming out, but do I need to play? It's intimidating.
Yeah.
That's why we're talking about this right now to say no, it's okay. These games aren't connected. So she was like, it's intimidating. Which one should I play first? You can play any one you want. I said, go ahead and play 16. It's out now. Everyone's talking about it, but. I will say my recommendation generally is to kind of you don't really need to play 1, 2, or 3, unless you really just want to play them all or just have a touch of that. I think with NES games in general, I even say this about Zelda, and I'm a huge Zelda fan. I tell people to skip the first Zelda even because I think unless you grew up with it, they're just less refined than a lot of things after that. A lot of the NES games. And so I know it's kind of a little bit of a hot take, but I think it's okay to just not even really play them unless you're really want to play through the whole history or something. Now that we're at 4 though, 4 is one of the first ones I really had experience with. And in 4, it still kind of looks like the NES ones, but the graphics are a little bit upgraded on the Super Nintendo. But it does still look very similar. It just looks like slightly different. In this picture, I've included some of Amano's concept art for the characters. His art has stuck with the series from the beginning into now.
Especially that bottom right one, you can definitely tell that
mostly now he does the logo design. So yeah, it looks like the 16 logo design. But he used to be the main kind of concept artist for all the games. His art is just strikingly amazing. I love it. And he does some graphic novels and stuff too.
Oh, cool.
And Final Fantasy IV was my first kind of Final Fantasy game. I had some older friends I kind of grew up with my parents and their parents were friends. So I was kind of like their part-time younger brother a little bit. They're a little bit older than me. And they had a lot of these games. And I didn't really get a lot of video games when I was a kid. So I had to play a lot of theirs or borrow theirs. And so that was my first experience with this game. And in this middle shot where it shows your party members and you can fight. Interesting thing on the Super Nintendo is either controller could control the menus. And so we would play this 1-player game as a 2-player game by holding the second controller and I would just pretend I was one of the characters. And so I would get to choose those options for the character. And so in this game, it's really good. This game has some really dark themes. One of the characters is a dark knight, working for an empire, doing bad things. And he kind of has to come to grasp that he's done terrible things. And this is a little bit spoilery, but whatever, it's an old game. But basically his whole journey is to go from this dark knight into becoming a paladin, which is a holy knight. So he literally turns from evil to good in a kind of by dealing with the terrible things that he's done and setting towns on fires or killing people and all this stuff. Because he's sent to essentially torch this town, but he finds a young girl there, and this young girl, her name's Rydia. I'm actually doing this off the top of my head, so some of the details might be wrong. I didn't even take notes on this, but her name is Rydia. She's the one depicted in green in the character art. She's this young girl. She later, there's a flash forward and she grows up a little, but she can kind of summon things, kind of like we're talking about in 16 now, right? So she has the power to summon these kind of otherworldly creatures that kind of come out and are crazy, powerful. So that's kind of the setting of this game, and it takes you all across the world and you do all these things, and there's crazy things happen and you end up on the moon just because it's Final Fantasy and crazy things like that happen. So there's a lot of crazy things like that kind of happen. So, but yeah, this game, um, it still has very similar kind of walking around towns and talking to people and going in the overworld. I love the tiny little person walking around the little world map. And
Yeah.
then, eventually a lot of these games too, you're kind of stuck like in the little world map. You're stuck on this little continent or island, and you have to like go to the towns, solve different like people's problems, and then you get to go and unlock things. And then usually by the end of these games, you unlock either boats or airships, and then like the whole
Mhm.
world you can just explore and visit places you went to previously and stuff. That's kind of
Oh,
another
that's
thing I really
cool.
like about these games is like the exploration and like just
Mhm.
kind of being able to do all that. Next up.
Yeah, that's good. It's definitely still can see that from the. I really like how we're going in chronological. You can kind of see
Yeah,
like
this
how
is the
things
guy that
evolved.
opens it up, right? They're not related to each other, but there's a
Theme.
DNA. Yeah. Now, next up we have 6, which is sorry 5. I've skipped it. I almost skipped this because it didn't come out in the U.S. So we're just gonna talk about this briefly. This one was one of the ones skipped in the U.S. It's 5.
Mhm.
It actually ended up being extremely important. You can see some of the graphics are cool. You can see a little chocobo there. I like how this forest is depicted. They're getting a little more creative with the
Yeah.
art and the way this is still in the Super Nintendo, but they're getting more details. You can see in this battle screen, this is more sci-fi. They get into like a factory kind of situation. So even if it's like
Yeah.
medieval stuff, there starts to be these like technological themes going on.
Yeah.
Um, this game is really all about. I've played it when it came out in the U.S. Um, and I'm not a huge fan of like the story overall, but it is really cozy and it's about exploration. The main character is really just wanting to explore the world and just see new things and stuff. But the real thing that makes this such an kind of a groundbreaking game is the job system. So as it's
Mm.
this kind of went back to Final Fantasy 1 where there's like crystals in the world and you kind of go and you help these crystals out, but different crystals had different what's called jobs that you would unlock with them. And
And what is that? Jobs.
so this opened up like a whole crazy thing in Final Fantasy where depending on like what kind of playstyle you wanted to do, you could change your party members. We call them party members, right? When you have like the 4 people in your party,
Oh
you
yeah,
could
yeah,
change
yeah,
their
yeah.
job. And so you can see the wind crystal jobs. There's like knight, there's monk, there's thief, black mage, white mage, and blue mage. Those are very traditional Final Fantasy jobs. So the knight is usually your physical damage person, like with a sword. Um, your monk is usually using fists. They like use fists or feet. They're like kicking. Your thief is usually using like little daggers, and sometimes they can steal items from enemies, stuff like that. And then black mage and white mage. Black mages usually use elemental magic to damage. White mages usually use magic to heal.
Okay.
Um, and blue mages are very unique. They introduced it in Final Fantasy V, but blue mages can copy enemy abilities. So if an enemy has like a
Ooh.
cool magic or ability, you can copy it. And so this game is wild because this is on the Super Nintendo, and you have all these like different party configuration options you can do. So like, you could have one person who's fighting with a sword, one person's designated to heal the other people, one person's like using magic on enemies. Some enemies might be weak to fire, or some people might be weak to, electricity or whatever. And then you can see like there's fire crystal jobs. We won't go over like everything, but there's water crystal jobs and earth crystal jobs. And so I'll just point out some important ones. Red mage is another kind of important job. They use like kind of like fencing swords, and they have what's called like buff magic, as far as like can make like your party member's strength go up, or strength
Okay.
your magic go up, or they can debuff, so they can make enemies like weak to things or different things, so they can buff and debuff. So that's an important one. Then you can see there's summoners, so that's like what we're talking about with, like with the icons or the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
summons. So you can like summon things. Another key one is the dragoons. These are dragon knights. So you fought one in Final Fantasy
Ragoons.
16, not a rangoon, a dragoon.
Rangoon.
You fought one in Final Fantasy 16. Remember, like there's that guy on the roof, and you're like, what? And it's like a little mini boss fight. He
Yeah,
was
it's
a
like
Ooh.
a
dragoon.
goblin,
Yeah, he's
right?
not the goblin, the other guy
Not
in
the
the
goblin.
castle after
Oh
like
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
castle's
The
being
guy
attacked.
that was
That's a
standing
dragoon.
really like
He
in
used
a
some of
very
the
cool
traditional
manner.
dragoon moves, like jump, where he just disappears and then comes back down.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's like this classic Final Fantasy, like with that job, they can like jump out of the way and then land back down. So some of the stuff you're seeing is like all the way back into like this era.
Wow.
Um, And yeah, it pretty much still looks kind of similar. I picked this ghost ship scene because it's cool. It's a ghost ship.
Ooh,
And so
spoopy.
you explore the world in this
Spoopy.
game. You have all these cool different jobs, and it's cool. But I didn't really get into the story as much on this one.
Can you change jobs throughout the game?
In
or
this
is
game,
it...
yes, it depends on the game. Some are locked to certain characters in some
Interesting.
games. Some are, it's flexible. It just depends on the
I mean,
game.
I enjoy having jobs in Persona. Is it
Yeah.
similar?
It is a little bit similar. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Big one. 6, which is called 3 here, right? This one is crucial. This is one of their biggest hits, even though they've been making games for a while now. This is one of the biggest hits. This one's huge. A lot of people my age, kind of like older people, I guess, this is like, they consider this to be the best Final Fantasy game. And there are, good reasons for that.
You haven't given us yours yet. Are you waiting till the end?
This is one of them. This is one of my favorite games of all time, actually.
Jerica has a question.
Yeah.
On the hype meter for remakeability, or I hope this gets remade, how high is 6 on people's radars?
We just got a pixel remaster last year.
Okay.
Which I would say is a very good way to play this game. They redid the soundtrack as well. The soundtrack to this is incredible. This is some of Uematsu's best work in this game. It is amazing. And so they redid the soundtrack, more high fidelity. It sounds incredible. Super good. I'll explain 6 a little bit. Why I like 6. 6 is why a lot of people really attach to this. This has one of the most interesting plots. The cast of characters, it's some of the best cast of characters in any Final Fantasy game, in any, I won't say, almost in any RPG, in the sense that, at least for me, you have these, each one, and this is some of them, this is their concept art, just because I like the art. And each one they deal with very different, they're all different ages, different places of their life, different life experiences, different backgrounds. You have a thief who's leading a rebel group. You have a girl who's like a painter. You have like a knight who is, you don't know it until later, but he's really dealing with the loss of his wife through war and stuff like that. You have you have a rich kind of this guy next to the koala looking dude. You see that koala bear? The guy to the right of him, his name's Setzer. He's like a rich guy who drowns all his problems in gambling and substance abuse. You have a ninja who has a very mysterious past, and he's a little cute doggy. And you learn through flashbacks, you learn about the tragedy of his past too. So each of these characters has a complete story, and you follow, like, there's a whole overarching story in the game, but each character has their own kind of drama they got to go through, and they're all intertwined. This to me is like peak Final Fantasy. A lot of the games have that kind of feature to it, but this was on the Super Nintendo. It's mind blowing. As I said, this is one of the first RPGs that I kind of played on my own, that I started to realize like a game isn't just like I said, I'm a huge Nintendo fan. I play, all the platformers, Mario, Banjo-Kazooie, whatever, all these games. But this is the first game I've played where I realized like it's dealing with like real world themes, real world trauma, relationships. There's romance. It's got like all this stuff. You can see some of these pictures I chose. The picture on the bottom left, you can see that enemy is the enemy you find in that swamp in 16, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like that same little vine enemy.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah. And then the top picture is like the beginning of the game. They're like tromping through the snow. This dramatic music is playing. It's an iconic intro.
Okay.
And, the basic, I'll just play some. The basic setting.
Wait, is this date right? Is this 1987 or is no?
No, I forgot to. Oops. Ignore that. It was just 4 a.m. when I'm working on this. Ignore the date.
I was just making sure. I was like, wait.
No. This is
really
not.
Quick. In the chat, Jazzerman XIX, first time I'm seeing your name. Hello, welcome. Said love FF6 so much. It did some different things for RPGs at the time as far as storytelling.
Yes, I like how you said XIX. That's technically Roman numerals, Kayla. Anyway,
Is it?
Good
Is it,
job.
this scene that's playing right now, what he's talking about, this scene is famous. This is called the opera scene. This scene had
19.
a almost 45-minute, a little bit more, basically cutscene in the Super Nintendo game. Like right here, you can see it playing. It's a whole opera scene where the characters get caught up in this, and she has to like play in this like she like fakes that she's like this opera singer, and it plays out this whole opera scene, and then they have to escape from this opera house because people are like after them and stuff, and it plays out this whole like long drawn. There's like lyrics. There's a song. There's a full like song that plays with different movements like and there's like it's like traditional opera movements and stuff, and throughout the game, throughout the opera scene you see like here you take control of different characters while the opera's going on, and then it cuts back to the opera. Like just this is incredible to be like happening at this time in gaming. A lot of things when you think about these games, I think this game does hold up now, but think about when this came out. This is what I'm talking about, where like this game was pushing the edge of like what the console is doing, what other games are doing. You know, there weren't a lot of other games. There are other RPGs on the Super Nintendo, some really fantastic ones, but Final Fantasy would always try to find a way to like present something new that players haven't seen yet. And so this is just one of the scenes that is a great demonstration of that. And what's crazy about this game, like I said, there's like all these great characters, and about 2/3 into the game, it does have that theme of like there's an imperial government that's taken over all these kingdoms, and they're the empire, and you're part of like a rebel group. It does have that same kind of motif that is famous in a lot of, like I said, a lot of anime, a lot of video games. Star Wars is like that. But what happens is one of the court kind of chancellors, his name's Kefka. I'm going ahead and like talking about a little bit of FF6 spoilers because whatever, you guys had 30 years to play this thing. But his name's Kefka. He's maniacal. He does some super messed up things. Like in this town, he just poisons their water source, so like all of the women and children just die like horrific.
Oh my gosh!
Like, you drink the water and they all die. And he's working for the emperor of this empire. One of the main characters you're playing, she's what's called an Esper. Different Final Fantasy games call their summons different things. Sometimes they're called Guardian Forces. Sometimes they're called Espers. Sometimes they're called Icons. Sometimes they're called Eidolons. Sometimes, there's just different. Sometimes they're called Summons. In this game, they're called Espers. And your character, it actually is a little bit similar to 16. Your character is like one of these kind of creatures, but she's in a human form. And she was frozen in a crystal, actually. And the Empire has recovered her. That's how the beginning opens. They recover her out of this crystal, this Esper. And they put on this mind control device so that she's a slave like to the Empire. And one of the rebel forces rescue her. They don't really know truly what she is or what the Empire is researching. They rescue her from the Empire, and she doesn't have her memory. And so then throughout the game, there's a lot of identity, right? She's figuring out like, what is she? Who is she? Like, what is going on? She's basically a monster, right? And she has to come to terms with this as she starts remembering like who she is. She's a weapon. She's a monster. What ends up happening is essentially you're this rebel group and you're fighting against the Empire, and they're trying to collect these ancient beings, these Espers, to create a weapon for the Empire. Well, what happens is Kefka, once they kind of get it, about 2/3 into the game, Kefka's like, you know what? Actually, I'm just going to take all this for myself. He kills the Emperor, and he actually becomes like a god. Kefka does, and he takes over the world, and the bad guys win. The world goes to ruin, actually. The world goes, it's like post-apocalyptic. And you and your band of friends have to go in hiding or face death. You all get scattered across the whole world. And there's a time jump, and the rest of the 1/3 of the game is some of the most crazy, like, I don't want to use the word despair, but there's some intensely lonely scenes where it goes to like these different characters that you've played with throughout the game, but they're alone and the world is ruined. You don't know if your other friends are alive, if they survived this takeover. Kefka's now like literally like a god. Like he's like living in like this heaven area, and he's just like a ruler. Everything's like destroyed, and essentially you have to like get the group back together. You travel the world and you try to find what happened to your friends, and you get them all back together. It's a really cool game, really memorable. This is why a lot of people really connected to this game. It was a lot of people's first, JRPG. It was one of my first JRPGs.
A lot of people jumped on here.
Yeah.
I would say. Okay.
I would say a lot of people did on the Super Nintendo. So
Late from Lunch said this game's actually one of the greats.
It's really good. And so you have to get everyone together to face he's basically a god now, like literally, and you got to kill God.
Wow.
That's another recurring theme in anime and Final Fantasy. So, yeah, that's 6. Yeah, let's jump to 7. So, Jerica,
Oh,
you played 7 and 7 Remake,
yes.
right?
I was a big
Yeah, you
fan.
got your
So
Cloud. 7 is
Oh.
a little nerdy over
Nice.
also
here.
one of the greats, right?
Yep.
So 7
I
started
will
what I call the golden era.
I will say this. Okay,
Yes.
because I've always been told. So my first was Final Fantasy X, but all the Final Fantasy people on all the forums or wherever I was reading about Final Fantasy at the time when that came out, and even up till up to now, like everyone's like, play Final Fantasy VII, play it,
Mm-hmm.
it's the best game of all time, so good,
Yeah.
play it. When the rumor started, I feel like this rumor's been around for like 20 years. Like maybe even 5 years after. I don't know when people started thinking, "Hey, they should remake it." But I just remember this and like something that hasn't happened yet is like Half-Life 3. Final Fantasy VII remake, Half-Life 3, and there might be other unicorns
Mm-hmm.
out there where just one of those things that everyone was just always hoping would happen. And it actually got announced at E3, I believe.
It was announced for a while. It got rebooted because they changed developers.
But I remember seeing it, and I have never played a Final Fantasy. I've never played Final Fantasy VII, but I knew immediately what it was when I saw the cinematic and I saw the sword on his back. Is that iconic? And I don't know what this game means, but I had chills because I was like, "Holy shit! This game's getting remade. People are gonna lose their minds. They're gonna lose," and they did. Everyone lost their minds.
We could talk. We could do a whole podcast about this. Again, we got
Oh,
to
yeah.
kind of move
Big
faster.
graphical jump, by the way. Big graphical jump.
Yes, good
Yes.
point out. So this game, I would say, is probably the most. This is the most. I'll just say it. Yes, this is the most influential Final Fantasy game of all of them. This one generated the most hype. This is. I don't know this for a fact. This might be hyperbole, but I'm gonna say that this is one of the reasons why PlayStation was so successful. Maybe the reason. As I said, there was some bad blood. Final Fantasy used to be Nintendo exclusive. Of course, it was really just Nintendo and Sega at the time. PlayStation was new. They needed some big hitters. They didn't have a lot of exclusives. There was some bad blood between Nintendo and Square. Square was like, fine, we're leaving. We're going to go over here. And they released this on the PlayStation, and it was I can't even describe like what it did to like the world, at least the video game world.
Even like just watching cutscenes, because after I beat the first part of the first remake game, I went back and tried to play the original because I wanted to just see, like Josh, you were telling me how much of the game, you play this whole 40-hour, 50-hour game, and it's like the first 2 hours of the actual.
Yeah, so the remake is basically the intro of this game.
And I just thought it was insane though, like the cinematics, like similar to like, I mean, we'll talk about, maybe one day we should do like a Metal Gear Solid. And I'm not an expert at it, but but Metal Gear Solid and this Final Fantasy VII, like you just really, I mean, even in Final Fantasy VI, like some of the cutscenes you were showing were cinematic, like as cinematic as it can be. But seeing some of the cinematics that start off with Final Fantasy VII, like it feels like a movie. At its time, it was like a movie. And
so cinematics are a big part of Final Fantasy. I'll go ahead and play some video during this little discussion, but cinematics are a big part of Final Fantasy in general, and especially in this era where they're doing what's called full motion video, where you have like CG movies playing. And in this game, we also start what's called fixed camera view, which is some people's favorite. I love the fixed camera. So that's when the camera stays still and characters are moving around the world and the camera's not moving. Of course, in this clip is about to go to like here we have my favorite, a world map where you can walk around and explore. You're like a tiny person and you walk around the world. And in these scenes, everything's 3D. But when you're in towns and you're exploring, the camera stays still. And what they've done is the technology here is they use computers at the time. This is 1997, but they use computers to make a high quality, background rendering, just a picture. And then they put that picture in, and then they have the 3D characters kind of moving in that picture and scaling correctly or whatever and walking around. Resident Evil 1 and 2 use this trick as well. They're fixed camera games in the original ones. And so it gives it a graphical feel that is like especially if you're watching this on an original, CRT TV, it looks really good. It looks very high quality. Like the graphics were incredible at the time, and we're not even talking about like the story, but just the
The
technology,
tech,
right? When this
yeah.
came out, it was insane, and you could see the case is big because it's 3 CDs. And what was fun is you would play it, and it's almost like a book, right? It would get to this crazy part, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it, and it would be like, all right, save the game and insert disc 2. It's
Oh
like,
my
oh my
God.
Uh,
we're going
That's
to disc
awesome.
2. Um,
that's
yeah,
really
look,
cool.
late from lunch and chat said Final Fantasy 7, Metal Gear Solid, and Final Fantasy 8 all came out in consecutive years. That was a wild era,
That
right?
is
So
crazy.
there is some insane games hitting, and you can see, real quick in this video, what they're doing down the menus. This is what's called the materia system. This became a big favorite.
I
Whereas
remember
your weapons
this.
had these slots in your weapons, these circles, and you could find little items called materia. They're like little marbles that you could insert into the slots in your weapons, and this would give them different attributes. And so,
Ooh,
yeah, big
that's
thing about
cool.
Final Fantasy, like I mentioned, is kind of like what kind of system they're using for leveling up in each game. They change it. It's different in each game. In this one, you have magic. You do have summons. The summons have like really long cutscenes that play. So it's like, ooh, I'm going to summon Ifrit. Ifrit's one of the ones from 16, right, Kayla? The
Yes.
Ifrit is fighting, the Phoenix, and Ifrit's in this one. You summon him, and he does this like huge blast and like blows up the enemies, and so really, really cool. Did you play? Oh, you played remake. I'm not playing like a lot of the, or I'm not. We're not going over really spin-offs and remakes because that would also just take a lot of time.
Mhm.
But yeah, uh, this game is really long. It's really cool. Sephiroth, Cloud, they come out of this game, very iconic. The plot in this is very very Ghibli-esque as far as there's a lot of ecology to it, because there's basically an evil instead of an empire this time, it's an evil corporation that acts like a government called the
Okay.
Shinra Corporation, and they have like a giant city, but they have other kind of reactors everywhere, and they're sucking out what's called the life force of the planet, or the the Mako or the Mako. There's some people are Mako families, some people are Mako families, how they
That's
pronounce it.
more Mass
But
Effect stuff.
they're sucking out the energy of the planet to power their cities, and they have high-tech stuff, and like, ooh, we have technology and we have power, and you realize it's killing the planet. And this is obviously like a pretty on-the-nose metaphor for like what we're doing to the planet now, essentially, right?
Yeah.
As we're basically using all the natural resources. And so that's kind of you're actually, when you start the game, you join a group of eco-terrorists, and so you are literally blowing up trying to blow up the reactor to, because you want to like help heal the planet. But in true Final Fantasy form, you think, oh, this plot is about stopping a company from sucking up the resources of the planet. No, don't worry. There's
No.
clones, there's meteors, there's aliens, there's all kinds of crazy things happening and going on. So it gets wild. Crazy things happen. Actually, in Final Fantasy VII Remake, controversially, they've changed some of the key plot points. So who knows what the story is even now? I don't even know what it is now because they're changing it as we go. It's crazy though. It's also like Sakaguchi's been pretty open about this, but he was really dealing pretty harshly with his mother's death at this time, and there's some very intense themes of losing loved ones in this.
Didn't know that.
That are, without really talking about it too much more, but it's pretty intense. Like, and it comes across in this, and so. This game is a lot of people's gateway drug to Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy in general. Some people like this is the only one they played, or they played just this and a couple more. But a lot of times when people say they don't like a modern one, it's because they're comparing it to maybe this, because modern ones are a little bit different. This one's great. It has the things people like. It still has the turn-based battle system. It has the motion videos, and it's great. It's a good one.
Nice.
Oops, I put in a bonus here. Which is, I didn't put a title slide because I throw this in the last minute. And even this is titled wrong. It still says Final Fantasy VII. But I did want to throw in a bonus here real quick, 30 seconds or a minute, called Final Fantasy Tactics. This came out actually the same year as Final Fantasy VII.
I like this art a lot.
Yes, it has a different art style, different art director. You can see the characters look a little bit different. And this was a tactics game, meaning it's on a grid-based system. This is more of this political intrigue, very much. This is just like a pure political story. These different kingdoms in war with each other, blah, blah, blah. It's a really long game. This is a tactics. I don't know if you're familiar with the tactics genre. This is made it very popular. There's other tactics games, but basically the gameplay is you have party members and you're on like almost like a chess grid, and you can only move a certain amount of squares, and the enemies can only move a certain amount of squares. And so you have to strategize like how you're going to move in each battle. Some of these battles per battle could take
Kind of like
40
chess.
minutes or more.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's like battle chess. What is unique about some of these tactics games, which has become like a hallmark of a lot of them, even Fire Emblem is another one that does this. And Fire Emblem has been a long, like there's tactics games have existed way before Final Fantasy Tactics. So I'm not trying to say that this like invented the genre, but one cool thing is like you have all these characters, but if they die in a battle, they're just dead. Like,
Oh,
so
wow.
their story just ends there. Like, oh, well, that person's just dead. And that's a lot of companies and a lot of different franchises they do that. Like, where like it's high stakes, right? Because like if your character dies, they're just going to be dead. Jazzerman in the chat said praying for a Tactics remake or remaster. So yeah, there was a Game Boy Tactics Advance. It wasn't a remake or a remaster, but it was this game. So this game exists separately. I said I wasn't doing side ones. There's a
Interesting.
reason why I've included this. Some people may know why I've included this real quick, but I did include this to mention tactics. Take note, Kayla, because you might I might reference this again. Next slide. Final Fantasy VIII, one of my favorites. Did you notice anything about the
I like
logo?
the art.
Yeah.
It
Interesting
looks
logo.
fiery.
Yeah. So Final Fantasy VIII is more of a romance, actually. And little Josh, 15-year-old Josh, emo boy, playing this. Let me tell you, when this game came out, this one hit for me.
Is this the one with Squall?
Yes.
A lot of people said this
So,
was their favorite on our socials.
hit. That's because a lot of people are, Late from Lunch. This is his favorite. We actually connected early on that. Actually, me and Late from Lunch have known each other for years and years. We try to make it as Twitch streamers on here. We've known each other for years and years. And one of our early like relationship moments, just how like me and Jerica kind of connected on video games, and me and Kayla to an extent, I connect with a lot of people around that. Final Fantasy VIII is actually literally specifically how me and Late from Lunch connected with each other.
Aww.
Because a lot of people, this is not their favorite. I'm going to go ahead and say it. Like this one kind of is underrated, I will say.
A lot of our audience said this one's interesting.
We have a good taste. Your audience has good taste. Late from Lunch says, here we go. The pinnacle of all that is good about Final Fantasy. So they came out with Final Fantasy VII, and this is their follow-up, Final Fantasy VIII. This is you can see like in this middle shot, they're still using the fixed camera with we would call them pre-rendered backgrounds, but the characters are more human size instead of like tiny like the Final Fantasy VII ones,
which I prefer.
Yeah,
I like
they
how
have
this
like
looks
a human look to them
more. I like this
the
look.
cutscenes are really good in this. Square is actually an early pioneer of motion capture technology. So this came out he said, I mean, look at that town. I can hear the music playing, right? Fisherman's Horizon. The motion capture in the full motion video, instead of animating things by hand, they were, it's industry standard now, motion cap studios, whatever. I don't know, they didn't necessarily invent motion capture, but they're one of the first video game studios to be using it in video game production. And so their cutscenes are heavy with very realistic human movements because they had actors actually acting it out, and they invented and pioneered some of the technology that was used for that. You have an interesting cast of characters, and let me tell you, well, really all Final Fantasy, but Kayla, you'll know about, like, because you read a lot of books, how fans like to ship different and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Final Fantasy, you got people shipping everyone like all over the place, left and right, cross games, like whatever, but this game it's got a lot of people in their feelings. Squall is notoriously like literally an emo boy. His catchphrase is ... whatever, because like literally like things will happen and people are like, oh my gosh, are you just gonna react like that? And he'll just be like, whatever. Like he doesn't want to deal with it. He's a loner. He's got a cold heart. He doesn't want to deal with people. Nothing matters to him.
I can change him.
Well, that's how, Renoa comes along. She's bubbly, she's energetic, and she's like, you need to just open your heart, and they fall in love, and it's this whole love story. I got my first girlfriend shortly after this game, so it was kind of like,
Were there some pro tips in there?
I don't know, but I just like, it just came out like around the time where like I'm dealing with these kind of these are teenagers and I'm like a teenager. It's just like it matched out like where I'm dealing with like this kind of stuff.
I will say
you were
this.
alive.
Characters down there, like in the middle you have Squall and Renoa, and they're like the couple that ships. To their left you have Quistis with the whip. People, let me tell you,
Whoa.
don't look her up.
Okay,
Google her.
okay, I won't.
no, you can't.
Or look her up, Jerica.
Oh,
Quistis is his teacher in their little school, but she's kind of like their age, a little bit older, and so she's got that like authority figure, but she's kind of anyway. The people, they go crazy over her.
So Josh,
yeah.
real quickly, I went to the very first like anime convention thing that I went to with my friend. I don't even remember what it was. It was just in Atlanta, but it was a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember that all the people that were there just started screaming because there was a gentleman that was dressed up as Squall playing the piano.
Oh.
And his piano Squall is what they called him. But I just remember hearing all these girls going, Piano Squall, he's here!
Piano Squall!
And like they were, people just huddled around this guy playing the piano.
There are piano moments in this game, not necessarily with Squall himself, but there's there's actually it's interesting. This game gets crazy. Like I say that about, I'm probably going to say that about all of them. The story seems pretty straightforward at first, but it gets wild. The Final Fantasy likes to do this thing where they're like, okay, this is your enemy this whole time. And then like the last few hours are like, actually, it was this person who's actually a god or who is trying to destroy time itself. Or like, that's what happens in this one basically, where it's like you're going along with this enemy you're fighting the whole time. And then the real enemy of this game is trying to compress time so that they can be alone forever or something. Like, this game is like a lot of like lonely feelings and stuff.
Wow.
I should be playing. Oh, so I'll show you what I mean in this quick clip, but like we can talk about it. But basically,
Jezreman did say this. They're in the minority and did not like this one. I said all opinions are welcome.
So Renoa comes up to Squall in the ballroom and she said, "You're the best looking guy." This is their meet cute, and he's like, "Whatever." Like she's like trying to stay at the end of the ball. Everyone's having fun. He's like, "Whatever." Like I'm not into this. You only dance with someone you like, like whatever, right? He just like whatever.
Okay,
so she's like, she's trying to be like, come here, Mister.
Come here, Mister.
She's like using all these
Come
like.
here, mister.
She's trying to be like personable to him, right?
You're going to like me.
And
Good job, Jerica.
again, sorry,
Anytime.
podcast listeners. This is more of a like, you might have had to see it.
You'll be
And so
fine. Come on.
She's kind of dragging him on, like, look, I can't dance alone. So then it kind of cuts into like a full motion video, and this is what I'm talking about with the motion capture.
Ooh.
So they're
this looks
using
good.
actors to motion capture, and at the time, again, this is 1999, right? This is like Toy Story is not even motion capturing, right? They're animating by hand, and so the way that everyone's moving in this game, and like it just looked at the time, this is like I can't even believe like what I'm seeing. Some of these, I literally thought this is like photorealistic. It kind of is in a sense of the like the motion to it, but like there's all these little motions and stuff, and so this is their meet cute, and it's just a really good game overall. It's similar. There's a plot. An interesting plot to this game is that what we call the summons, or like in 16, right? The icons in this game, they're called guardian forces, and they really integrate that into the story deeply without. I don't really mind spoiling it too much because I mean it's an old game, but basically they learn that they've been using these things their whole lives, these guardian forces, but they've actually been having long-term health effects on them, and it's been messing with their long-term memory and implanting memories and blocking memories, and so they have to start realizing that they've had false memories and coming to terms with
Wow, that's very interesting.
It's insane. Yeah, it gets actually kind of wild. And one thing that's really cool about this system is the junction system in this game, which different guardian forces had different things you could kind of equip, kind of like materia, like we talked about with 7, but you could equip different things that different kind of guardians gave you. And like for instance, some of them are crazy. Like you could get things that would churn battles off, or you could get things that would give you 25% more experience
Whoa.
Points. Yeah, so you started having things that could affect like the actual gameplay. happening in this game. And so this is another, if you look like you have a pre-rendered background and then you have characters kind of moving through and within this like kind of like nice looking scene. And so, anyway, this game's really cool. I still recommend it. It hasn't really been remastered or anything. It just kind of is what it is. And that's kind of Final Fantasy VIII. And this one though, Final Fantasy VII was on 3 discs. Final Fantasy VIII's on 4 discs. So
Whoa.
Bigger game.
So how many hours do you think that one is?
All these games are around 40 hours ish.
Okay.
Around 40 hours.
Good
40,
to know,
50, depending on like if you're like going fast or whatever. Final Fantasy IX. This one is cozy. They return to their medieval roots. Because a lot of people, one of the complaints about 7 at the time, of course now 7 is just like, oh my gosh, Final Fantasy 7. One of the complaints was a little bit too technological. They have rocket ships in 7. They have like spaceships kind of. They have like, they have cars and stuff. 8 as well. It's kind of sci-fi. 8 is actually a little bit sci-fi. So everyone's like, oh my gosh, Final Fantasy's just turned sci-fi now. This is what I'm talking about.
Pierce said this was his favorite.
9, right? So 9 is a pure medieval. It's got cozy vibes. It's got some of the best pre-rendered backgrounds and full motion video. It's great. The characters are very interesting. You play as Zidane, who has that monkey tail. This one is also actually very romantic as well. I should have mentioned, back up a little bit to 8. Final Fantasy 8 was the first game to have a vocal theme in the game. Plays in the game like a love theme that has lyrics. They had it was in Japanese, but they had lyrics for this game. Final Fantasy 9, it returns with a new vocal theme, but they have it now localized. So the singer sings it in English for the English version and Japanese for the Japanese version, but it's the same singer. So this is Final Fantasy 9. We'll play some video while we chat about it. This is this is like a very medieval game. I'm not going to spoil too much about this because there's rumors that they are remaking this one. These rumors are hot, like pretty confident. We just don't know the timing, and we don't know. Yeah, he has a monkey tail. We don't know what kind of level of remake this is going to be, but it's sounding maybe not like Final Fantasy remake, but maybe something where it's like these backgrounds are more 3D. And the overall kind of premise of this is you're like the member of like you're like a thief, but you're also the member of like an acting troupe, and you're trying to pull like a heist, basically.
I have a question. Don't let me. Yeah. I won't interrupt, but keep going. But I have a question.
Please. Yeah.
Before you dive into this story, because this one, I'm really feeling the look of it. I'm excited. I hope it gets. I hope it gets remade. But I will say this: like, is there a lot of teams that work on Final Fantasy games now? I would assume multiple. But because you got the 7 remake, they're still working on Rebirth.
Yeah, so this is like what I was
saying. And then
saying.
16 just came out.
So correct. So if you revert back to that slideshow I showed you that had like it had like Nomura and Yoshida and stuff. So remake right now is being kind of helmed by Nomura, who worked on Final Fantasy VII. Actually, he worked on like a lot of Final Fantasies, and he's kind of taking over remake. 16 right now has being done by Yoshida, who did Final Fantasy 14. So yeah, there are a few teams involved here at this point. But at this point we're at now with 9, it's still Sakaguchi as the main. Remember, the George Lucas of Final Fantasy. This is his last one.
Okay.
So he's with Square the entire time. All those games we've just talked about, he's done these 3 Golden Era games, 7, 8, and 9. This is the last one that he does for Square. Then he leaves the company and starts his own video game company.
Interesting.
And not to get too much into this, I don't have slides about it, but he comes out with some very Final Fantasy adjacent kind of games. One of them, Late from Lunch likes a lot. What is it called? Lost Odyssey.
Yeah.
It's very Final Fantasy-esque. And then he also does Blue Dragon, which was an Xbox JRPG with Akira Toriyama doing the art, the Dragon Ball Z guy. So very interesting. And he's still around. Actually, 9, I wanted to talk about this during 9. 9 is very special to me because when 9 came out, I just remember I told you I just finished Emo 8 game. And I was 15 and I got my first job. because I had a worker's permit, so I could work at 15. And my first job was doing tech support for. I lived in Hawaii. I grew up in Hawaii, and my first job was doing tech support for a internet service provider, which was in downtown Honolulu, in a skyscraper right on the ocean. Very beautiful view. The skyscraper is called Harbor Court. It's still there. Of course, it would be, right? But the reason I mention this is because at this exact time that I have my first job and I'm working on like what I think is like the 15th floor of this building, 2 floors above me, they are actually making this game that we are watching right now. Because what happened is while FF8 kind of came out and while FF8 was like wrapping up or being released, Sakaguchi, this is part of the reason he leaves, unfortunately, but Sakaguchi, he did 7, 8, and 9, but he says, you know what, let's make a Final Fantasy movie. I think I can make a movie. So he says, he's like, this is like Kojima, right? He's like, I'm going to make a movie. So what he wants to do is make a 3D movie, all 3D, that will surpass any graphics anyone has seen before. And so what he makes is Final Fantasy the movie, Spirits Within, Final Fantasy Spirits Within. And but what he has to do is he doesn't want to, like, he doesn't really know how to make a movie, but he wants to write it or direct it or like whatever. But he realizes he's going to need talent from not just Japan. So he wants to hire like Hollywood people and like people from like the US. So he thinks like, okay, what's kind of like in between Japan and Hollywood? It's Hawaii. So he moves to Hawaii and he rents out this building or one of the floors on the building. And he is making Final Fantasy movie. He brings people from Hollywood over to Hawaii. He brings people from Japan over to Hawaii, and they're making Final Fantasy the movie. But at the same time, he's still in charge of Final Fantasy 9. So he also brings the Final Fantasy 9 dev team with him to Hawaii, but they're on a different floor
so close
in this building.
What the
Here's
heck?
The crazy thing. They're not allowed to talk to each other. The movie people and the game employees are not allowed to talk to each other because he didn't want any crossover ideas. He knew what was going on.
That's very interesting.
But he did not want any crossover ideas. And so me, every day, I'm riding the elevator with these people, all these Japanese people or like whatever. And well, Japan's like this in general, but it's completely silent. There's no talking. They're not allowed to talk to each other. So let me tell you though, this is interesting. So this is like my dream come true. I'm like, I cannot believe, like, yeah, they're making Final Fantasy 9 right above my head. I can't believe this. I've been a Final Fantasy fan my whole life. All these people are like doing this right above my head. And actually, there are Hawaii Easter eggs in this game. Well, there's more to that. The Chocobo song on this game is called Ukulele de Chocobo, and it's a ukulele theme. So they sneak in Hawaii things into Final Fantasy 9. So here's the thing. Me growing up in Hawaii, my childhood next door neighbor growing up, he was always into 3D graphics and stuff. And he actually ends up working on this project as one of the lead animators for one of the characters in Final Fantasy the movie. And so he's like, oh yeah, dude, like, I can like show you around or whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, please. So I go to, well, I worked in the building, but I arranged to go up there and I had to sign an NDA. Like, it was like really long, like a lot of pages.
Is there a statute of limitations on this NDA?
Yeah. Well, I guess. I mean, I'm sure it's fine now. But I had to sign an NDA because they hadn't shown a lot of the Final Fantasy movie yet. It was very under wraps. They hadn't shown a lot of people what they were doing. And they ended up like they had to bring helicopters to the building and reinforce the floor with steel beams because the servers they were using for the movie was too heavy for the building. And so they had to like reinforce the building. And it was insane. I met I did the whole studio tour and I saw some of the most unbelievable things I could even imagine. I couldn't even believe what I was seeing was real. It was photorealistic. And when I talk about photorealistic, I'm actually sure I have the Making a Final Fantasy book. They had things like, the character like, this is, in the year 2000 and it looks like, real, like it was blowing anything that any other movie was doing away. But there was a cost. This movie, the budget ballooned out of control. I think they spent over $240 or $250 million on this movie, and I think they might have made like $70 million back. So what ends up happening, and I'll explain a little more, but basically what ends up happening is the movie bombs. They lose a lot of money. Sakaguchi, even though he made them millions and trillions of dollars with Final Fantasy 1 through 9, they basically agreed to part ways. That's kind of what happens. The movie studio closes down. They actually did a segment of the Animatrix, for the
Oh
Matrix.
yeah.
Before they closed down, they did an
Yeah.
Animatrix segment, and they closed down. I was very sad because I was actually going to intern there. I actually literally had it set up where I was going to be able to intern there because of
That's
my
awesome.
connections. And I will say this book actually, because I had friends that worked there. Basically, I gave him this book, and he's like, "Oh yeah, give me that book. I'll put it in the break room." And so a lot of the staff signed it.
Shut
The
up.
people he just kept it in their break room, and so a lot of people signed it. And then some people they signed it like near their page, like
That's
if
cool.
they did whatever, they like signed it.
That's
And
really
so
cool.
I always like this. I didn't really get to directly meet Sakaguchi. He was still back and forth between Japan. I did see him once, but I didn't.
You saw him.
I didn't really get to like meet him directly. But
That's
yeah,
really
touring their
cool.
studio was insane because they had like they would introduce me like they're like, oh, this is like so and so. These two women, they're like all they do for the whole movie is look, the cloth. They just do cloth simulation. And they're like, oh, this is so and so, like Dave. And Dave, all he does is like doorknobs and chairs, like for the whole movie. It's like it was crazy.
God.
And then I met the. I wish I could find it. I told Late from Lunch this. I met the concept artist. Was the same concept art from The Matrix, and
Wow.
he was so nice. This guy is so nice. And I was looking at his cubicle, and then he was like, oh, here, and he took something off the wall and he just gave it to me, and it was like one of his drawings of the Matrix ship that they're in, the Nebuchadnezzar.
Oh, that's cool.
And he just gave it to me. I don't know where it is.
Shut up.
But
You
anyway,
gotta find it.
I'm getting like way off
find
topic,
it.
but
Okay,
that was a personal
Let's
story.
circle back.
Final Fantasy 9. That was a personal story.
That was
anyway,
I had
really
no.
cool.
You've never shared that with me, so it was
yeah,
first
that's my
time hearing.
personal
That's
connection.
good.
I was obsessed, and I got really sad that they had to like move out because I was like, oh my gosh, that could have been like my future career in life. Or
Yeah.
whatever. But hey, that's okay.
It's still a cool story here on the podcast talking about it. Nice.
So he left the company, and so that ends the golden era of Final Fantasy. PlayStation 2 comes out, and we have Final Fantasy 10.
I really like this art.
Jerica played Final Fantasy 10, right?
Yeah, this was the first Final Fantasy game I ever played.
Yeah. So,
It was.
Jerica, why don't you tell us a little bit about Final Fantasy 10? What do you remember about Final Fantasy 10?
That's a great way to start it. What do you remember?
Yeah.
I guess for me, like I was just finally playing something other than Spyro and Crash Bandicoot, I guess. So, I guess I was ready to dive into a more mature game. Is this mature? Not really. It's pretty goofy in my opinion. It's very funny. But I just remember like the first cutscene and the music was like I was into rock and roll. I was into grunge, and I just really liked the soundtrack to this movie. Is really good. Like the opening cinematic.
Yeah, the opening
and the
cinematic
music
is there's like metal.
It's dope
this
as
was
hell.
big news at the time. It's like literally metal. It's like,
yeah. It's awesome. And I don't know what's happening. I just know
my video is messed up.
I just know Sin is coming, right? They call it Sin, and like
okay,
it's gonna end the world.
Yeah.
Titus, main character of this game, like wakes
Very
up.
Nomura, by the way, his design. Look at his
Yeah.
pants leg. His one leg's longer.
There's definitely
he's got buckles and zippers all over himself. You could. This is where you feel the Nomura influence. The big shoes, big yellow shoes.
Definitely like
wow, what a great lesson of all the Final Fantasy games.
Yeah. For real.
I'll just say, I loved how this game looked. I liked all the characters. They were goofy. I remember, is it Waka? Is his name Waka?
Waka, yeah.
Yeah,
Waka.
And they
on
played
on the picture of the characters is the guy with the tall hair with the headband.
Red hair, yeah. I liked also one thing I've noticed in Final Fantasy 16, I told Audrey, I'm like, oh, that's a Final Fantasy 6 or a Final Fantasy just a thing. Is like
What's that?
Is it Sid? No, that's
yeah, Sid.
Sid.
Yeah. I didn't mention this, but there's a
Sid,
recurring character called Sid in every Final Fantasy
He's got
game.
his arm like this.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Like that. It's cool.
You see,
the arms. I don't think the arms hurt. I think it's a
the character in this.
cool
His name's Auron. On the left of these character portraits, you see his arm sticking out of his sleeve. Yeah, the whole game he has his arm like that for no reason. It's not like his arm's broken.
Yeah, the arm's fine.
Cool.
It's just stylish. It's cool. I'm gonna start holding my arm like that. Like, oh, is your arm broken? No. Final Fantasy.
This game, I'm gonna say like this is a weird one because for a while this game kind of got poo-pooed on, I'll say.
Why
a
did
little
it?
bit.
I liked it. There was a
No,
lion man.
Not when it came out. That's what I'm saying. When it came out, it was another big industry event. It was very popular. And then for I think because some of the games after this started to get people were a little iffy on them, and then they were thinking like, well, this all started. 10 was like the downfall. Sakaguchi left, and so 10 is like starting, with the whatever. But I think it's having a little bit of a resurgence. It just got a remaster pretty recently. Look, Late from Left didn't get poo-pooed on. It is poo-poo.
What?
He doesn't like. Hold on. He doesn't like beach themed things. This is a very beachy.
Oh yeah,
game.
it's definitely more approachable for my taste. Normally I
So
do
the thing
like
about
something that's
10,
bright and fun.
Do you know what isekai is as far as like anime genres? It's a very specific type of anime and manga genre, meaning another world. It's where a character is in a world and then they get transported to a different world.
Okay.
Right? There's a
Yeah,
lot
that's
of
what
anime
happens
and
here.
manga like this.
It's like
Yes.
Alice in Wonderland.
So yeah, exactly. Yeah, Alice in Wonderland is a good example. So Titus, the main character of this, like you said, actually, now that I think about it, this is basically Space Jam. This is basically Space Jam. So basically, Titus is LeBron James of his world, and it's kind of like a sci-fi world. And they have this thing called Blitzball, and it's this big sphere of water. He is an athlete. He's a top athlete.
He's very popular.
And then in Blitzball, you swim in the sphere of water, and it's three-dimensional, and you have it's like basketball in a sphere of water, and you have to like throw it in the other.
The music's epic when they're played. It's badass.
So
I enjoyed
it. Is LeBron James of underwater basketball.
LeBron James.
And something goes wrong, and he gets transported to the world of what we call Spira. Is this world?
Yeah.
And he's like, "Where am I?" And it's this crazy world. And this is Yuna on screen now. Her name's Yuna, and
She's got to go cleanse things from sin.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the couple that meets is Yuna, and there's something called sin in the game. This is another interesting thing about Final Fantasy. They use a lot of terms that sound like religious terms.
Yeah.
That often are, but they're like not the same thing what they mean. Or it could be a metaphor. And they use terms from Buddhism, from Hinduism, from Christianity very often, but they often are just all scrambled up and like not really what they are supposed to mean. It's just an interesting thing that they do. So in this game, the main enemy, I say that because remember what I told you in Final Fantasy, oftentimes it's like it just changes, but the main enemy is something called sin. And sin in this is more, it's not like the concept of doing something wrong. It is more of, it's like a huge alien whale kind of.
Yeah.
And this alien whale sin is going around destroying towns. This is, like I said, it's like a archipelago. So it's beach kind of cities. And this alien whale is destroying towns. And there's two main religions in this game, and this game has a lot of religious undertones. Even though I said that sin doesn't mean what it is, it actually does have a lot of religious undertones. And Yuna is training to be what's called a summoner, and these summoners are supposed to be like able to appease basically sin, and sometimes even make sacrifice themselves. But basically, the villages think that different religions have different thoughts of how you stop sin, but they do different things and have different practices, and everyone thinks they're right and they're the ones doing it. So there's a lot of obviously religious themes in here. And Yuna is a summoner, and she's training. She has to go on do these trials to become a true summoner. And Kayla, you'd really like this theme because I know just some of the kind of vibes you like. But there's this very famous theme is actually kind of where the picture of her is from, where she comes to this village that has been destroyed by sin. It's very somber, like everyone's crying because their family members have died, but their spirits can't move on because of how they died. That's one of the things about sin. If sin kills you versus like other ways of dying, your spirit is trapped, and you need a summoner to basically free that spirit or whatever. So there's this really interesting scene where she actually like walks out up on the water. Walking on water is a religious theme, but she walks out upon the water, and there's this kind of chanting music, and she does this like water dance. That's like in the logo. And she's like releasing these spirits so they can, be free.
Interesting.
From being trapped. There's a lot of themes of death and religion, and kind of questioning like, well, all these people have these beliefs. Well, who's right? I don't know. Maybe everyone's wrong. Very interesting themes. Waka is a true believer. He's actually a very religious person in his religion. And so one of his character arcs, he's like the comedic relief. But
Mhm.
one of his character arcs is he really starts as they're traveling all around the world and they're dealing with all this trauma and different things. He really starts to question things because you're dealing with these corrupt priests too. So that's another thing that's in a lot of anime in Japan is corrupt religions and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Very
it's good.
interesting.
Also, you can see Lulu over here, right? You see Lulu
Oh yeah,
in the middle.
Lulu has
She's
a
kinda got-
Moogle.
yeah, she's got a Moogle plush. She's
Oh,
like a
cute.
mage, but she's got like big cleavage and big
Yes.
belt. Like her
Yeah.
dress is made of belts, just belts all over
Mhm.
the place. So very Nomura.
Jazzerman in the chat said Final Fantasy, the champion of random side
Yeah,
games.
we've skipped over side games because we're running out of time. We're kind of running late. Hey, it's Final Fantasy, but a lot of these games have side games and card games. You can see on the screen now, this is what's called the sphere grid system. This is how you level up. It's actually similar to
Ooh.
16s, but basically you move along this sphere grid to like level up. I threw this in as a bonus just for Jerica because I said I wasn't doing side games, but the next game is Final Fantasy X-2. Now,
Interesting.
after the tragic events of Final Fantasy X, I'm not going to spoil the ending,
Oh,
but Final Fantasy
so
X
good.
ends in a very
Yes.
it's a sad ending.
It made me.
Um,
I finished it, and teenager Jerica was a little sad.
and
was
Yuna is this
depressed.
meek summoner, but throughout her trials, she becomes, this true summoner and has to deal with whatever. But she's still this kind of, I don't know how, she has a certain air of respectability about her, right? She's a summoner. So then the first sequel, direct sequel, yeah.
That's what I was gonna ask. Yeah, is
Yes,
direct sequel.
10-2, but look, it's weird. It's a Roman numeral and then
A dash.
not a Roman numeral.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this is the first sequel to a Final Fantasy game. That's what's confusing. It was like Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3. They're not sequels, but this is 10-2. So this is a sequel to a Final Fantasy game. And Jerica told me, I don't know if she's joking, but she told me
No,
she
I'm
thinks
serious.
this is her gay awakening.
Yes. It was. I was like, I think I might like girls.
So this is the weird thing. After Final Fantasy X,
There's a lot of
it
girls
says
in
very
this game.
serious story, very plots about like trauma, death, whatever. They're like, okay, we're making the first sequel of Final Fantasy. It's called Final Fantasy X-2. And you're like, okay, that sounds interesting. Let's check it out. Well, what's going on here? Like, what's happening exactly? So
I definitely.
Riku, like wears a bikini. Yuna, for some reason, has guns and
Hubba
her butt's
hubba.
showing.
Yeah.
And then
She's a bad girl now.
Lulu is gone. I guess they didn't
Summoner
think Lulu was gone enough.
Schmummoner.
So there's this new character called Pain.
And she's my
And
favorite.
she's
I had a
like
statue of her
got a
too.
soul
Yeah, she's
belt and
nice.
she's
It says, I sort of like, not saying I never really made this connection, but I have always liked, I thought women with short hair is very appealing. And Audrey, when we first met, she had short hair and she was such a bad
Aw.
girl. I was like, man, it all started
Wow.
with this game.
let me tell you, when I
Wow.
put this game in, this is from the intro. Just
It's
real
great.
quick here.
This
is
game's
from the intro.
awesome. I
I was
enjoyed
like,
this
oh,
game,
okay,
obviously.
I'm sure it's still Final Fantasy X. I was like, but she's this summoner who, oh my gosh, I don't know if it's just my internet or what's going on.
It also had
RNG.
a good ending. It it was a good bookend to the
I don't
10.
know.
summoner. It starts and she's like in this arena. And you're like,
Wow.
"There
Oh,
she
just
is,
wait,
that's
you're not
Yuna,
ready.
that's
You're not
Yuna."
ready.
And then I was like, wait,
She's
what's
a
happening
summoner.
to Yuna?
She doesn't party.
Hold on, what's happening? It's like the Sailor Moon situation.
Yeah, just wait.
And there's no audio, but basically,
It's very
after the events of Final Fantasy
Whoa.
X, she turns into like this
Pop-
pop,
A
star,
pop star?
I guess. Yeah. And so she just goes around, it's like Yuna, and then she's just having like these concerts. It's like, what is going on?
So random.
The whole system of this game is built around this dress system, and so yeah, you like change their clothes and
it's
so-
great.
yeah,
Wow.
it's a bit much to me.
That's
I
so
actually-
funny.
It
enjoyed
actually
this
still
game
has a lot of
so
classic Final Fantasy
much.
elements.
And
so.
I feel like whenever you meet the villains, I can't remember if it was this one or 10, but I love the villain music in one of these games. Like, it's so good. Like,
Yeah.
I watched this a lot. I played this a lot. Obviously, why? So,
There you go. I include that just for you.
thank you.
We're short on
Masterpiece.
time. We're gonna zoom through a little of these.
I
We're
mean,
not
this
gonna
is all
spend
you
much-
got to see from this game.
Yeah, this
There's
is all
no.
you gotta see. Final Fantasy 11 comes out. It's an online MMORPG. This is unheard of because at the time this was what is this? 2002. World of Warcraft doesn't come out until 2004, so this is 2 years before World of Warcraft. And
Wow.
Final Fantasy 11 is very it's on PS2, it's on PC.
I actually tried to play
And
this on my PlayStation because I love Final
yeah, I
Fantasy
played
X,
it.
and I just never
Mhm.
understood what was happening.
It's kind of insane. I played it for many years. I loved it. It is a punishing game, very punishing. You would have to wait around for parties for sometimes hours,
I think
and
that's why.
like you'd be in the town, and like you could remotely find someone to party with, and you're like, oh my gosh, I found a party, I got to get over there, but they're on the other side of the world, and so I'd be like, oh shoot, the next airship leaves in 20 minutes. This is like real life, right? It's like I got to make it to my airship, because if you miss the 12 o'clock airship, the next one's not for another 30 minutes, and my party might not wait for me that long. So I'd be running like, oh my gosh, I gotta make this airship, and I'd go, and then the airship would like pull out like right before I get there, so this is like this was a very interesting game. And when you died, you would lose 10% of your experience points. So very interesting. I loved it. I played this a ton. This was one of my first like massively multiplayer online games to get. I should say I was a Nintendo fan my whole life. The thing that convinced me to get a PlayStation, I thought I could hold out through FF7, but it was when Final Fantasy VIII came out where I was like, I need a PlayStation. I can't hold out anymore. So that caused me to go multi-platform. This caused me to get a PC. I was a Mac user my whole life. I was like, Final Fantasy 11 is coming out on Mac. I've got to get a PC. Final Fantasy very often causes me to get whatever console it's on. I bought a PlayStation 5 just to play Final Fantasy 16. I didn't even have one, right? So I just play. I want to be wherever Final Fantasy is, and so that's what I play. But
Wow.
I do have a little pointer or something.
Oh wow!
I don't know how I did that. Anyway, this is Final Fantasy 11. We're not really going to talk about that much, but it was online, and I liked it because I played it a lot. Oh, I'm skipping 12 a little bit. 12 is really good. So remember I talked about
This title looks different.
yeah, and remember I talked about Final Fantasy Tactics, right?
Yeah.
This is why I mentioned it. 12 takes place in the world of Final Fantasy Tactics.
Oh,
Oh,
interesting.
cool.
Okay.
Evilus. And so this one is like a straight up political intrigue one. It, again, is similar kind of to Final Fantasy 16, like what we're playing now, as far as like its kingdoms warring against each other. And you're kind of caught up in the middle of this kind of situation. This is from the HD remaster. They did remaster this like last year. But it was you're like in this kind of a desert kingdom, and it's got really cool art design. It's got a very interesting battle system that is similar to an online battle system, or like Knights of the Old Republic, if you play that, where when you see the enemy that's out on the field, time can kind of stop where you can choose your commands, but then you can still move around freely, and it kind of it's not action based like Final Fantasy 16, but you can kind of press the button. You can kind of choose what your character is going to do next. It also had what's called the Gambit system, which is where you can kind of program your party members to do like if this then that. So like if my HP gets down to 25%, use this potion, or like you could kind of program them to be like bots sort of, and that's how this game kind of worked.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so
Jasmine in the chat said great game in my opinion.
it is good. Here's some battle. So these little lines would come up to show who the enemy's targeting and who you're targeting. And then it doesn't have to pause, like they're not pausing in this, but basically your character just auto attacks. So it is still time based, and you can see that attack meter building up at the bottom. And then when the attack meter fills up, your character would attack. So it's a very interesting hybrid of a 3D action based system as well as like a turn based system. I like this game. Yeah.
Late from lunch said this whole thing is too macro. We lost Jerica's wig. It's getting late into the night. We lost her wig.
He means your mic's not on. He means
Oh yeah, my eyebrows are just
like,
there.
You're literally like making macros for the characters essentially. You don't really. I mean, you can autoplay it. You could literally like auto level. Some people make a macro to like level up themselves.
Wow.
But the story itself, to me, it is really good. It misses some of the things I like about some of the other Final Fantasies, because this is a little bit more of a straightforward story. So I would say if you're someone new to Final Fantasy and you're looking for maybe something a little more Western in style, you might would like this storyline, because it doesn't get crazy with all the aliens and time travel and like all this stuff. This one does stay like a pretty easy to follow, like consistent political drama. So it is good. To me, it misses. I actually like some of that kind of wild and goofy, crazy, off the wall stuff that happens in Final Fantasy. So it misses a little that for me. I do like some of these characters. There's that rabbit girl Fran in the picture. I have a little thing. She's really cool. There's I don't really like some of like the relationships. I don't think they're very believable. So I don't like the characters in this as much as some of the other ones. But I think the overall, the world, the design is really good. It did come out with a remaster. A lot of these remasters, they add a lot of quality of life things, like where you can like fast forward time, like run really fast over areas or like do different things. So I do think it's a good way to experience it.
Okay.
We're gonna talk about 13 briefly. This was probably one of the most controversial games. This is where your wig comes from. Lightning is from this
Yeah.
game. 13 is divisive because it's very sci-fi. Here's a clip of Lightning being just like really cool, and she's like this cool like sad girl. She has like sad girl vibes, and she's just so cool. And Square really tried to push Lightning hard. Like they wanted to make her like Mario or something. They were just trying, like they designed her. I actually like Lightning a lot. I like her design. I like her costume and like her outfit.
You'll never be able to unhear Liara now that you know.
Yeah, I
have to
think you're right. I
listen
didn't know that about Liara.
With the reveal, I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna take it off.
This one, in maybe direct like opposition, like where I said 12 is kind of a consistent kind of a storyline. This one has a wild storyline all the way through. It's super confusing, to be honest. You have these things called fall seas and la seas, and there's like these gods the gods don't have free agency over themselves, so they create these things called fall seas, which are like humans that are under like gods controls that they control to do like free agent stuff because they don't have agency.
Prophet kind of thing?
Kind of, but it's not necessarily good if you're chosen as one of these because then you lose your agency. So it has like, it's just weird. It's weird. So the world is called Grand Pulse or Pulse, and there's this thing called Cocoon, which is kind of like the Traveler in Destiny. So there's just this weird thing called the Cocoon, and that's like, it actually is very Destiny-esque.
I will say also, I didn't mean to bring this up, but I thought it was interesting because like I feel like this was the first time I just realized, like, has there ever been a black character in Final Fantasy until this game?
Good question. Final Fantasy VII does have Barrett.
Okay, I forget about Barrett, but also
I will say, well, this is, I mean, I'm not necessarily the most, obviously we're all white too. I'm not trying to be like the most the best representative to speak to this, but I will say there are some controversies surrounding their depictions of minorities or diversity.
Yeah, this game was, there was something about it.
Well,
sidebar, I was just like,
some of how in this clip, this character, he has an afro, which is fine, but some of his mannerisms and the way he's voice acted, it does come across a little bit cliche or stereotypical.
Like a stereotype.
Yeah, a little bit. And as well as in Final Fantasy VII, the same with Barrett. It's a little bit borderline. I'm not speaking for everyone, and everyone, different people might have different feelings about it, different, whatever. Again, and this is not an excuse, but Japan and Japanese developers do struggle with this. Their culture is very monoculture in general. And so they, like I said, it's still, their society is still kind of 60s. We'll even talk about like with LGBT stuff.
I was like, 10-2, definitely Paige should have been a lesbian, but she would have never, not saying that, her, I mean, she definitely more of a fluid woman.
Say some of that, some of it is changing, even recently in Final Fantasy 14, which I haven't talked about. Yeah, that's next, but this the online one, they do allow gay marriage in that game because it's an online game. But it was a big controversy actually when they started allowing it. In Japan, it was a controversy, not so much here. Kind of like that book we read, the Tomorrow.
Yeah,
there's a plot line surrounding that where this online game starts allowing gay marriage, and it causes like a mass shooting at the game dev studio because there's people against it. And there, not that there was a mass shooting, but that controversy happened in Final Fantasy when they started allowing that in the game. Some of the people obviously like got really upset about it. So it's very interesting when kind of real life politics bleed over into entertainment. But yeah, that is a good question that you brought up. They do struggle with this still, and like I said, their depiction of women has been pretty good considering their society or like societal norms.
Yeah.
And even just video game norms, they've always had interestingly written strong female leads, or just female characters that don't like fit just damsel in distress molds.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
they still do struggle with other kinds of representation. Yeah, consistent. But that's 13.
Okay. This one looks good.
A lot of people, late from lunch says, tape your joystick up sim. This was one of the complaints about this game, was that it is a too linear, because you basically, the whole game kind of, you just go and you're just going.
Yeah.
Even like, look at this screenshot. It just looks like a hallway. But this game, they call it like a hallway simulator, where you're going through the plot of the game, and it's just like a path that you're following. I will, in its defense, it does open up, but it doesn't open up until the very end, and then it becomes like more of an open world. But it's like literally the end of the game, so it's kind of pointless. Like they could have maybe paced that differently. But I'm gonna defend it again. This game, I actually really like the battle system. It is one of the last turn-based battle systems in Final Fantasy so far, and also I think that the story, even though it is convoluted, there are some interesting things about some of the themes that it deals with. The characters aren't great. I do like Lightning. I'll stand by Lightning. They did try to push her a little too much, but I do like Lightning. And just as a quick thing, I can just pull up. There was just to show you how much they tried to push her. It might not show it. Tell me if it shows this picture.
No picture.
No picture.
No picture.
Well, look it up. Prada and Louis Vuitton both had collaborations with Final Fantasy, where Lightning was a model for Prada and Louis Vuitton. So so she's been a high-end fashion model for both Louis Vuitton bags and clothes, as well as product clothes.
That's so interesting.
Very
what the
odd.
Heck? Wow.
Okay, 14. We're basically at the end of the night, because we're not really talking about 16. But there's 14 and 15 left. We're getting late, but I have to talk about 14 a little bit, if that's okay. And 14, very impactful for me personally. This game is incredible if you haven't played it, and it has some crazy things that have happened, because when this game came out initially, it was horrible. So it came out, and I was looking forward to it. I was playing it with my friend in Hawaii. We played we played Final Fantasy 11 together, and we used to play Final Fantasy Star Online on the Dreamcast together in 1999. So I've played some of these online games with some of my Hawaii friends like forever. We were looking forward to this. I was living here in the mainland. She's over there in Hawaii. We're like, okay, Final Fantasy 14 is coming out. Let's go. We get it. Extremely disappointed. It was a horrible game. It was horrible, literally awful. They actually brought Nobuo Uematsu back to do the full soundtrack, and even that was like, it was weird. It didn't really match the game, and the whole game was like very odd, and it didn't really work right. And eventually Square Enix decided that it wasn't really working, so they brought this guy named Yoshida, which I showed you his picture as a notable people. They brought him in, they got rid of the director, and they said, please see if you can fix this game. So he comes in, and he's like, all right, yeah, this is trash. Basically, it's not working. So he starts making a roadmap. Like, I think we can, make adjustments here and there. And he starts a thing which is new to Square, which is transparency. And he starts actually communicating with fans in a way, sort of like you'll see it with like Destiny or Overwatch, kind of, but where he just starts telling people what's going on, like, and just is truthful about it. And this is very new to Final Fantasy or in Square in general. And so he starts having these updates where he's like, okay, this is what I'm working on this month or whatever. I think we can improve this here and there, whatever. So this goes on for a few months. And then he has to make an announcement where, to get this game where he feels like it's going to be a good game, he needs to shut it down and start over, basically. So they came out with Final Fantasy 14, determined it wasn't very good. And then he comes in and basically is like, you know what? The only way I can fix this is to start over. So then he starts, but he doesn't want to just like flip the switch. He starts writing an ending into this online game, into the plot of the game, even though it's a bad game. He starts writing an ending where one of the summons, like we were talking about, the summon Bahamut is coming back out, like an enemy is coming out, and it's coming out to like destroy basically the world. And all the characters are trying to stop it before it happens. And basically this is crazy, never been done, But basically, when the server shuts down, there's this huge cutscene that plays where the world gets destroyed, basically, and then the game just turns off. Like,
what?
right? Basically, like they just
I
turn
didn't
the
know
server
that.
off.
That's so
Yeah,
cool.
it ends like the end, like you lose, like the game ends. So then it's got to be off because like they were working on some other game a little bit, but they had to turn it off to like finish. So then the game's off for like a couple of years, like whatever.
What?
Like this is crazy, right? So the game's off, and then they come back out with it. Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn, and the plot is that the events of the other game happened, the thing happened, and everyone's memory kind of got messed up, but the world's changed now because of this cataclysmic event. And so you're now living
so
in
it's
this.
like, so it's
they
like
built it into the story of the game that the other game basically sucked. And they built it into the game. So the story of the game, which is similar to like what we've been talking about, the basic story of the game is that there's another evil empire that is trying to use these basically there's these creatures that are actually in this clip right now. There's different kinds of these what they call beastmen. This is one type of them, and each beastman has their own god, which is one of the summons. And the beastmen like to try to like pray to their god or resurrect their god, and the god is like one of the summons, like Titan or Ifrit or Shiva or Leviathan, depending on what, if it's like a water creature or like whatever. And there's a evil empire of humans that basically is giving these beast tribes crystals to feed to their god to summon these gods up. And the empire wants to study these gods to make their own like mashed up super god, super weapon. So this is a very Final Fantasy plot.
yeah,
And
for sure.
basically you're a member of a team called the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. That's a picture of them right there. And you're one of the team members of them as the like player character. And you guys are basically like the world police, sort of like it's like Paw Patrol or something. I don't know. Like you gotta like stop these gods from being resurrected, and you find out this plot that this empire is trying to resurrect them, and then you gotta stop it. So great, it was great. But then they have like multiple expansion packs, right? And each expansion pack is like another 40-hour game. So in its own sense, these are like
Whoa.
sequels to the game, right? So you have Final Fantasy XIV, which deals with that. Final Fantasy XIV Heaven's War deals with a different part of the world, different kingdom that has been in a war with dragons for 1,000 years. That's actually what clips from this one is from Heaven's Ward. And you have to deal with, it's actually almost like, not to offend anyone, but basically the kingdom is ruled by something very similar to like the Catholic Church. It's a theocracy run by the religion. And they have their own teachings and about men and dragons are evil and all this stuff. And of course you find out that at some point dragons and humans coexisted, and there was like this love story and like all this stuff. And basically you're trying to topple the religion of this kingdom and show that it's corrupt and try to broker peace between humans and dragons after a 1,000-year war. That's the expansion pack. Very good. And then the next one after that is called Stormblood, and that one is all about colonialism. This is one of the first Final Fantasy expansions where I ended up tearing up a little bit at the end.
Aww.
It is very good. It's very political, but it's all about the impact of the empire having spread out and taken over different kingdoms and colonialism and what that does to communities and like different things. It's incredible. And then after that is one of the best stories in JRPGs, not just Final Fantasy, which is the next Final Fantasy. I'm like tongue twisted, partly because my brain is mush and we've been talking about this too long. But basically, it deals with like light and darkness, because the whole game you're dealing with like you're like bringing light to the world, and you go to like this alternate. I don't want to spoil too much about it, but you go to like this flip side of your world where the things you have
upside
impacted,
down.
Yeah, it impacted this other world because you basically you brought too much light, and the light is killing that world. So you have to turn dark and bring darkness to that world. And the themes in that one is incredible. This one I full on cried at the end. It's insane. I don't want to really tell you like what some of the plot points are as to like why or what happens, but it just deals with like so much intense like loss and friendship, and you're with your friends this whole game, not just your online friends, but I'm talking about like the little NPC friends, and the plot lines that they write for this are just like immaculate, incredible.
Okay.
even though like this one is intimidating, right? Because it's like to get to some of these really good ones, you do have to play through a lot of game. Like you have to play through the first one, then you have to play through Heaven's Door, then you have to, there's all these expansion packs. But
Yeah.
the payoff is totally worth it, in my opinion, to experience just for the story. They even in the last 2 expansions, they tried to make it more like a single player experience where some of the things that the dungeons that you had to partner up with people for, they made it where you can just
Dungeons,
bring
Jerica.
I know, yeah.
You could just make it with NPCs, so you can actually play them, even though it's online. You can play them like basically as a single player game, but you do kind of have to get to those points. The storyline, I'm like serious, it's just incredible. It kind of went viral on Twitch, if you remember, like during COVID, because like all the Twitch streamers were like playing the new expansion just because like it was so hype.
Nice.
Our last
That was
one
like 2020.
Well, yeah, it's been coming out like every year, pretty much.
Yeah.
The last one before we wrap it up is Final Fantasy 15. This one is controversial because it started off as a Final Fantasy 13 spin-off.
Huh.
So what I didn't mention about Final Fantasy 13 is you have Final Fantasy 13, you have Final Fantasy 13-2, and then you have Final Fantasy 13 Lightning Returns. So there are 3 Final Fantasy 13 games because they were really trying to be like, you must love lightning. And then this game was originally called Final Fantasy 13, like Fabula Nova Crystallis or something crazy like that. It was like some wild name. And it was stuck in development hell for like years and years and years. It kept getting like changed, rebooted. They would show it off at like Tokyo Game Show. It kept getting changed. And then they're like, you know what? It's not Final Fantasy 13 anymore. It's Final Fantasy 15. So they decided to just make it Final Fantasy 15. It has nothing to do with Final Fantasy 13. In this game, you're basically a bunch of bros on a road trip. This is what you were talking about, Jerica. How you were just like, you seem like, Late from Lunch said versus 13. At one point it was called Final Fantasy 13 or Final Fantasy versus 13. Not that it was like multiplayer or anything. It was just called versus 13.
It makes no sense.
No. So in this game, you play as Noctis, who's a prince, and you have like your buddies who are like bodyguards. You go to like American diners, and it is a very bizarre, high budget game.
It looks very different, yeah.
It kind of, it's high budget, and I think if you play Final Fantasy 16 still takes some of what they're trying to do here, but really refines it and brings it back to what Final Fantasy is, because it still has the combat system is still like an action combat now, and you go around, you can drive around this world map in literally like a car. And the weird thing is they tried to release like a movie. Okay, there was like a Blu-ray movie about this, and it was a prequel to this game showing what happened before. And what happens before is like, in your kingdom, you're the prince of this kingdom. Basically, this Godzilla monster like comes out and like destroys your kingdom. Like it's like crazy. And so what's weird is you start this game and you're with your pals and your bodyguards and like different things, and you're a prince and you're driving around. And at the beginning of this game, you drive to this beach town. You're like, oh, cool. We're like going on like a little vacation. And then the events of the movie happen, but in a very strange way where they just play little clips from that movie that they made separately, where it's like, oh no, your kingdom got exploded. And then they're like, oh no, and then they have this mechanic named Cindy, very odd. Cindy. But yeah, they just play like this little movie that's like, oh, here's what happened to your kingdom, and you're like, oh no, our kingdom's dead. And I don't know, like I said at the beginning of this game, I was going to try not to talk disparagingly, but this game did have a lot of, just realistically, this game had a lot of problems. I do think one of our friends, Kyle, this was his first Final Fantasy game.
Oh,
and he
really?
actually loved it. So I actually think if you just play this as a game, like a high budget, it's a AAA kind of game. I actually think it's a pretty good game on its own. It is weird.
But it does seem less Final Fantasy-esque in a way.
Yeah,
like
it has some strange things about it. It's an interesting open world. It has some decent systems, some decent combat, but the story is all over the place. They actually had to patch in part of the story at the end because he apologized, the director, because like it was kind of unfinished when it released, and some of the story literally people were like, wait, like what happened here, and they like try to fix it. And then at the end, and I'm going to spoil it a little bit, but at the end they try to pull like a Final Fantasy VI where it fast forwards and the world is kind of ruined because like the boss kind of takes over, and you look like this guy Noctis, who looks literally like Nomura himself.
Yeah,
You
he
just
really
look like the
does.
same thing. It's a flash forward like 20 years later. You just look the same, but then he looks like had like stubble like me. So it's just like it's funny. And then see the world's kind of beautiful though, and you can just roam around, free roam around.
Does it kind of remind me of GTA a little bit?
Yeah, because you're driving around cars. But basically at the end, you're separated. You haven't seen your friends in like 20 years because you like disappear. And it's just so weird because I'm playing it and then you meet up with them again. And then they're just like, oh, you're back. Let's go beat the boss. It's just really strange. Like it doesn't seem, realistic, but this was 15. And so after this, a lot of the like I said, our friend Kyle, this is his first game, and he actually really enjoyed this game. This is his first Final Fantasy game. But a lot of the longtime Final Fantasy fans kind of felt a little bit like maybe this isn't quite what we are wanting in a Final Fantasy game. And so just like I said, how Square called in Yoshida when Final Fantasy 14 was wrong and they said fix it, and then he released a banger hit, right? They basically did the same thing because they canceled. This had some expansion packs and they just started canceling it. And they're just like, you know what? This isn't working for us. And then they said, you know what? Yoshida, you do 16. So they hired him to do Final Fantasy 16. And that's where we are now.
Okay.
With Final Fantasy 16.
Wow.
And so Final Fantasy has been a long journey. That was I went over time, obviously, by like a lot. But I really am thinking like you see some of the themes as far as like obviously there's like things like crystals and chocobo and stuff, but I mean it's a lot of it is about these characters dealing with their own personal traumas and realizing that, I mean it's kind of cliche, but it's realizing that they can't take it on alone and that they need other people to help them is like what it is. That's like what Final Fantasy is. I mean, that is kind of, that's like, you could say that's like almost any story is like that. I mean, in a way it is, but it's how it's presented. I think that is what always really resonated with people and resonated with me because there is sometimes a comedic tone or a light tone to everything as well. Like it's not all serious all the time. Obviously there's like Moogles and crazy little mini games happening, but I think it's just the way in which the characters, like you said, like I think you brought up a good point. Like when you played the Final Fantasy 16 demo, not knowing anything about it, like you said, it was kind of weird because the characters almost look like they didn't match the environments that they're in. And I think that's actually a good call out because there's a surreal quality to all these games where it feels like it's kind of some of the things they're dealing with is close to what we would deal with, but they're in such a weird environment that like it's like off, right? And it gives it a dream. It gives the whole thing like a dream-like kind of quality to it, where it's like something you would dream up of. There's crystals and Sin is an alien and he's like attacking the beach and there's spirits and well, your dream would be different if we're talking about Final Fantasy X too, but
Yuna's a pop star now.
Yeah, she's a pop star. So I think, what are some of? I just rambled for like 2 hours straight, but what are some of the thoughts like after maybe not knowing anything about Final Fantasy, and now like what do you think?
I think that was a great wrap up. I think that was so good. Jerica, you go first, but for me, like knowing nothing, I feel like it was really cool to see like from the very beginning, like graphically, even just like how, they have like how Square has gone from like then to there. I think it was really cool.
And honestly, like I really just never understood. Like, I think I was disappointed. Like, I want to go back and like try to play some of the older Final Fantasy games at some point. But with you sort of going through this, I've never just sat down and just researched the history of Final Fantasy and like what is the point? What's the point of these games? Like, and on it, like also too, like I feel like I disappointed myself because like I feel like if you played one good one and you really liked it, you played another one and it just didn't hit with you. You sort of I don't know, maybe I just sort of gave up on it. You're like I don't want to play it again. But they're all so different that you sort of can't do that. It's not fair to any of the games because any of them, they all have their things that you might like. You might have a few that you love, You might have a few that you hate. You might have two that you love, and the rest are trash. Someone might like them all. Like there's
Like
there's
me.
such different games, but you sort of summarizing like what the point of every Final Fantasy game is, just having good characters, good story. And I think you summarized it pretty well, just saying, it's always been about a group of friends, different dynamics that are coming together and working together. And I just remember from Final Fantasy 7, one of my, or not 7, 10. I remember the intro to that where they're like on the hillside and the music's played, like the Final Fantasy. So that's the iconic song. I'm horrible at like naming what the name of the song is.
Yeah, there's some consistent themes that are in
And
music too. We didn't even talk about music, but yeah.
I don't know. It's just always like the future looks bleak. It's like they're not gonna make it through it, but they're just like they always come together and figure it out. And it's an emotional journey, but every game has its own way of telling that story. And
Intensity.
even different games like change up. This game, this IP has never stopped evolving. The next game might be something they're going to add something brand new to it that's going to make people.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah,
I didn't even lead you or anything, because like this is a perfect point that I wanted to get across, because I think part of the divisive nature of the fan base is exactly what I like about Final Fantasy, which is every game is different. And like you're saying, you might not like some games because they intentionally try to just do something totally different. They try to, each game they're like, you know what? I know like that game we just did was really popular, but for this game, let's just do something totally different and like try something different.
It still has the era of Final Fantasy, which makes I feel like it makes a whole lot more sense to me too, which by the way, you got a compliment in the chat from Jasmine. Good presentation for a series that brings something new with every game like we're talking about. You did a good job trying to explain it all.
Yes, thank you. It was a little rambly. I went like way over my time, but I'm like kind of in a weird manic mode anyway. But like, I get passionate about Final Fantasy. That's why I even wanted to do this. And honestly, like I can't really do it properly in this amount of time anyway. It's like such a long game spanning 30 whatever years.
It was a challenge. It was a challenge.
One of the thing is like, this is a weird connection, but like, okay, like my wife and I went to Japan last year for several weeks. It was a long trip. And obviously Japan, some of the best food in the world. But I'll be honest, by the end of 3 weeks, we were feeling a little homesick and feeling a little bit like we wanted some Western food, even though we ate tons of ramen, tons of onigiri, tons of yakisoba, tons of all chicken katsu, all this stuff. By the end of it, like we were going to McDonald's in Japan, but then even the McDonald's, like you get the Big Mac, and it's like got like teriyaki sauce on it. I'm like, I just kind of just want like a plain like American, whatever. And to me, this is a weird connection. But to me, Final Fantasy games, they're all different, but there's something about it that's like there's a connection or a thread that runs through them. That's like when you're in a foreign country and you find a cheeseburger and it reminds you of home.
That is perfect.
Find a McDonald's.
So that's what I'll enjoy about the series, because that's what I like about it. I actually like that it's different each time. I'm a Nintendo. Let me tell you. Okay. Behind me, you see all these red. That's all Nintendo, all the red. I'm a huge Nintendo fan. Being a Nintendo fan is buying the same game over and over again. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm being honest about it. I love Nintendo, but I've bought every Animal Crossing since the GameCube. That game is the same game like over and over again.
Of course.
And that's fine. You know what to expect. It's comfort food. That's what I'm saying about Final Fantasy. It's comfort food, but in different countries. And so that's what I love about it. And I think that's what some people hate about it, because they find what they like. They like Final Fantasy VII. They want every game to be Final Fantasy VII. And they would probably make a lot of money just making different versions of Final Fantasy VII again. But I actually appreciate the fact that they just go for it and take a risk. And sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes it's a little bit wonky.
Cool that they get to do that every time. They get to try something new. Like that's pretty.
Say, like, you know what? Just you take your take on it. It's different people. You do you. Let's see what comes out of it. And so, honestly, I haven't looked at the discourse on FF16. I can basically tell you what people are saying just without even looking. But because Final Fantasy fans are just, well, they're just a certain way. But it's going to be the same arguments over and over again where, people will be complaining about certain aspects either being there or not being there, and it's like some people
Yeah.
just like certain things and some people don't, and
And
you're
that's
never going to
fine,
please
yeah.
everyone. And to me, again, I haven't even got to play 16 yet, but the demo was incredible, and I'm looking forward to digging in more. And I know Jerica's already played more, and this will be your first game that you play.
Yeah.
And so I hope you
I'm
have the
excited to
confidence
update
now
you guys
after
on.
this to maybe pick one from the backlog at some point and
Ooh, yeah.
just try one, because there's no, you can just pick it up from any point and just try a different one. And maybe you'd like 13, maybe you would like 6. Who knows?
I think the one that caught my eye the most was 9, actually.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
same here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So,
think I want to do. I think I want to try
let's
9.
wait till the end of the year on that, because
Okay.
there's heavy rumors that are fairly plausible that there might be some sort of remake on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Josh.
Josh,
This was
thank you so
awesome.
much. This
Thank
is
you for having
incredible.
me.
You put so much work
Um,
into it. I really
For
appreciate
this
it.
long podcast.
Probably the longest episode we've ever done.
This
I'm
is-
sorry,
actually,
but
We've
We've,
probably
we've
done longer.
streamed for maybe about the
Yeah.
same amount of time. So
Yeah.
long
But if
form.
you guys have
Or
also like
played
if you
games.
guys have been watching this long, like because I do see that we've maintained like a lot of the people that we
Yeah, I
began with.
appreciate
So
the comments.
dedicated.
Final
Yeah.
Fantasy, like I call this, what did I call it? I called it before we leave here. What did I call it? I
101.
called it the revival era. No, the what did I say? The early on,
You
if
don't
you,
even-
you missed it.
you
Oh, I have
don't
all these
even-
people. I called it the
Oh,
revival
yeah, yeah.
era.
Okay.
And when I said
Yeah.
revival era, I said that might be good or that might be bad. We don't actually know yet. When I say that, I mean that they, like I said, Square has said, Yoshida, I think that you understand Final Fantasy fans. He's proven that. And so I think, and I don't know if he might not be doing 17, but they've created this, like, I don't know what you call it, like a council now, after after the divisive era. So there's a council of like, almost like brand protectors now, and he's on it, and some other people are on it that are kind of like executive producing Final Fantasy now. So they're trying to create some kind of a
It's
consistent
the
product.
apostles, you know.
Not
you
that the
gotta
game has to be the same, but I mean like the quality has to be
Yeah.
the same, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't
Wow.
want
And
to.
so-
I don't want to undercook game. I don't want a game there. The story, I have to wait for
Isn't finished.
an expansion for the story or a patch.
We'll
Like
see
I don't want
how
that.
long. We've been waiting a long time for this one, for 16. You can see the big gap. And so hopefully now that they might have some things figured out. Another thing
It
that
took their
Square is
time.
terrible about, especially in the remember I told you they're good at like technology, or they like kind of technology and stuff. They would use their own custom engines a lot, and it started getting out of control because that's a lot of their roadblocks with some of these games were like them trying to develop their own engine, which is very hard to do. And very expensive.
sure.
And I think they've maybe learned from that and are using more out of the box solutions. And you're able to do things much quicker
Yeah,
when you're using
sure.
out of the box solutions. So anyway,
Well,
Thank
we
you.
could definitely have a part 2 whenever we decide
Yeah, I think
to go back.
maybe when we all finish 16, maybe we could
Oh, yeah,
just
yeah.
do like a
Spoiler
recap.
cast.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's do it. I'd love.
All right.
I want to do that.
Me too. Well, thank you. I feel very educated.
Me too. I
Yeah.
am.
Feel
I think. Where do you think your percentage at? Your how
Yeah,
how
it might
full
have
are
gone
you
up a little.
now?
You were at what? You were at 4%.
Kayla's
What'd
at
you say?
5%. I forget.
5%.
yeah. I'm thinking probably. I mean, as far as history goes, I'm feeling like maybe like a 50. you know?
Hey, yeah,
Let's
that's a
go.
good-
Huge
that's a good
jump. I
improvement.
love it.
You know.
Huge
Right.
jump.
Just riding that chocobo across the world so fast. She's so fast on her chocobo.
What about
Lightning
you,
on the
Jerica?
chocobo with my Prada bag.
Yeah, exactly. The Prada.
I definitely feel like I now just could talk about, at least now I can start talking about Final Fantasy with Audrey a little bit more.
Yeah.
She stayed for a good bit of the stream, but I will say I saw her playing Destiny downstairs.
It is intimidating.
We lost her.
It's still intimidating. It's 16 games, even though they're not connected. I think part of the intimidation too, if you include all the spin-offs, that's where you might just ignore it. You might see in stores Final Fantasy Type 0, Final Fantasy this, Final Fantasy that, all these things. Just don't worry about it.
All right.
I didn't even
You heard
touch
it here
those.
first, folks.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I mean, some people like them, but don't worry about it.
All righty.
Right.
Well, we're gonna upload this on YouTube, so if you caught like the end of it, you can see the whole thing
Yeah.
from the beginning too. So
Don't worry, all 2 hours and 47 minutes will be uploaded to YouTube. I was actually able to save it locally, Kayla, so I'll send it to you.
Okay, cool. All righty.
right.
Well, we see you guys next time. Thanks, Josh.
Goodbye. Thank
See you next time.
Bye.